Oh yeah. So we'll see how many people actually watch. Right now there's only 2 viewers. Maybe there'll be no one here.
We have someone else using dries as the
We're
shorthand
live.
for dry
Okay.
saddle.
Hello everybody.
Hi.
Brian is just lamenting like odd nicknames of players that he doesn't like.
I don't understand. Yeah.
You don't like Dre's. You just like Dre.
Yeah, or dry.
Dry. I don't know. Okay, yeah.
Yeah, like why am I including the first letter of the last
syllable?
Of the next syllable.
Is there any others?
I can't get used to that. It can't happen. So if you're watching and you're on our Discord server, please drop the S. You'll be banned. Just kidding. Probably.
No, we would never ban.
I have, yeah. I like to try and be patient.
That seems like something you should be exceedingly patient on. That would be an odd thing to not be patient about.
Yeah, I guess maybe I'm yeah. There are other contextual factors at play here that have led to me not liking that shorthand.
Oh, okay. I don't know.
Yeah.
We're live, right?
We're live.
You're okay, I just wanted to make sure. Okay. So
I turn it on when the show starts.
No, this is on. You're bringing the heat right at the start.
Oh,
here.
Okay. All right.
And we got Shans, we got Shop Squad. So we'll see how this goes. We could always switch back to making this a live show for the non-patrons. But I just feel like it's fun hanging out with the patrons. You support us. Like you're the people I want to, do this show with. Our supporters. So that's
nice.
We'll see.
Yeah.
If no one shows up. I mean, we got enough people here. Honestly, I think we have quorum. Like with just whoever's here. So let's just let's do this.
What's quorum for a show?
Me, you, and then 2 good ones.
We have one watching now, but we have 2 chatters. So that there you go. Me, you, and 2 good ones. Quorum achieved. Okay. All right.
Why would UPL be Mr. 6K? Oh, because his last name has lots of K's in it. Oh, Uka Pekka. I get it. Yeah, that's good. Lots of K's.
Yeah.
Keeping Karlsson is 2 K's. So we're a fan of lots of K's. Yeah. All right, bro. I don't know why I'm saying bro. I like that word. I don't know why.
Just recently.
Yeah, it's really.
Go back and check the tape. It's really
taking a hold of me.
Yeah.
All right, let's start. Ready for this?
Yeah, I think we should definitely start the show.
Yeah, I took you a long time when you just said yeah, because that's what I was asking. So great, let's do it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Welcome everybody to the episode of the Karlsson Fantasy Hockey Podcast, the longest running fantasy hockey podcast in the world, hosted by 2 guys who left as many goals on the bench this week as Chicago. Oh, I didn't do this right. Hosted by 2 guys who almost left as many goals on the bench this week as Chicago has scored all season. At least I'm speaking for myself. Brian could comment, but man, these weeks with these busy days drive me freaking crazy. But it's over now. I'm your host, Dylan Dubrowski, and with me to break down actually just the last couple days. Thought it would be fun, but obviously we're going to break down a lot more than that. But that's the theme of this episode today. What was I saying? Oh yeah, my co-host is Brian Com, the fantasy hockey robot. Brian, welcome to the show. Hello.
Hello, Elon. Hello, everyone. It's great to be back on the show. There's no tension between us this time, at least not yet. I've learned from the response from the last episode. The problem is not you, Elon. It's me.
Oh.
I think my takeaway is that I am not competitive enough.
I don't think you have a problem, and I don't think I have a problem. I didn't even think it was that big of an issue, but apparently, yeah, it took a hold of the hearts of the people.
we had a lot of Team Elon in the responses, and I think the bottom line was just that I thought that this league that we're in together wasn't a big enough deal, and shouldn't have been a big enough deal for you to withhold information. And it turns out most people agree that it should be. Champs for Gramps.
Okay, I'm good to move on if you are from this to me non-issue.
Okay.
And because we got a big show today. Okay, so I joined Ben for short shifts on Thursday. Hopefully people enjoyed that episode. If you didn't listen to it, You can pause this pod, go listen to that one, then come back to this one, or I don't know, do whatever order you want. But I think we had a good time. And I basically had the opportunity to drop all of my takes on the players that were on my mind. So I figured I'm just going to wipe the slate clean. And now for today's episode, I've got the stats from just Friday and Saturday. And then obviously we'll get the Sunday games as we're recording. So we're recording this Sunday night. I'm just going to look at the top performers from the last couple of days. Then we'll, of course, look at some players on those people's teams. I think we're going to have ourselves a really nice time just getting right up to date with everything going on in fantasy hockey. Before we get to all of that, of course, very proudly presented by the site that always keeps you up to date on everything going on in fantasy hockey. And that's dobberhockey.com. The articles every day, just chef's kiss, frozen tools. I love it so much. I don't know what I would do without it. Please never go away. So yeah, that's dobberhockey.com. Check it out. But with that, Brian, let's just dive right into it with the player who had the most points. Oh, by the way, I'm going by cupful points just to have something to measure against. So that's the scoring system for our Keeping Karlsson Ultimate Patron Fantasy League. Brian, what's the website again for that league that we run?
It's kkupfl.com.
Right.
So much good stuff there. There's like fancy tools. You can also go and look at tier 1, like see what's happening in the top tier of the cupful, see what adds and drops are being made after like a Monday morning. Go look. If your league's a little slower on the draw, go see what the best fantasy managers in the world are doing and see if you want to emulate any of those moves.
Yeah, or if you want to do something really smart, go look at all the players that I've dropped, because that's going to guarantee you a ton of points. For case in point, Ryan Pulock. I dropped him right before his 4 assist game. So that's a little tip for you there. Go watch Elon's drops and you're going to do really well in fantasy. But okay, Brian, the player with the most couple points over Friday and Saturday is in New Jersey, the best team in the league. These guys can't be stopped. And of course, they're led by Jack Hughes. What a weekend. He had a goal versus Buffalo on Friday, then a hat trick versus Washington on Saturday. That brings Hughes to 25 points in 22 games. He's basically pacing the same as last season's 94-point pace, but so many more shots. He's been averaging 4.2 shots per game instead of 3.4. So almost a shot more per game. And to me, that's a sign that he could be even better, right? Like, I think that if anything, what we're seeing now in the past like couple of weeks is really the real Jack Hughes. Like, I don't know. I was so high into him like going into the season, and then I feel like he almost was like disappointing me a little bit, even though he's doing really well. So I'm curious to know if you concur or what you think about Jack Hughes at this point. Like, do you think that he's basically just the Jack Hughes from last season? Do you think he's better? Do you think he's going to break 100? Like, maybe to put in some more context, Ben and I on Thursday talked about Jason Robertson and how amazing he's been, and we talked about how maybe he's joined that tier in fantasy drafts for next year, like with the Pasternaks, Rantanen, Kucherovs, Kaprizovs. I'm curious to know, how far off is Jack Hughes from that group?
He's not far off at all. And also, he's not far enough. He's not far off from that group at all, Ilana. Don't sell yourself short on how you felt about Jack Hughes earlier. You said you like had this disappointing feeling early in the season, and a lot of us did. He had just 3 points in his first 6 games. And this was after, we were drafting with a ton of projections that were expecting Jack Hughes to have a huge breakout season to be worth a first or second round pick. But technically he doesn't slate in there in all formats because of his shorter track record. So some people jumped to get him where they thought he would end up. Some people didn't want to reach and thus lost out on him. And early on, there was a bit of disgruntled management out there for anybody who did go for Jack Hughes because of that slow start. But since then, Jack Hughes has 10 goals and 12 assists for 22 points in 16 games. Even more amazing, or not even more amazing, but to go with all that amazingness, 64 shots on goal in that time. So yeah, 4 shots a game. Hughes has only gone pointless 3 times in his last 16 games. In the other 13, he's had so many multi-point outings. This is the stuff of a first or second round fantasy draft pick. I have to imagine everyone is convinced now, including me. I'm looking at his numbers. I'm not seeing any reason to disbelieve in Jack Hughes. He's got better shot rates this season, which is good because he actually is spending less time on the ice. I think the Devils are sharing more of the line wealth, especially amongst those top 2 lines now that Nico Hischier is healthy and doing his own thing over there. But to offset the less time for Hughes's line at 5-on-5, that top power play is getting a little greater share of the ice time than they did last year. So we'll see if that continues. I expect it will. That unit has had so much success. So everything looks really good for Jack Hughes. He is in that Pasternak, Alex Barkov group that sort of goes towards the end of the first round. I wouldn't say Jack Hughes is has quite the same upside yet as someone like Mikko Rantanen or Nikita Kucherov or Kirill Kaprizov, some of these other names you mentioned, because I feel like they all have potential to blow far past 100 points. Hughes, I want him to get there. I want him to get 100 points. I think he could blow past it. I just don't know he's there quite yet, and I'll take the greater upside of that other group. But yeah, he slots in really nicely with, like I said, the Pasternak and Barkov type that go towards, somewhere around picks 12 to 15-ish, maybe even 10.
Yeah, though Pasternak maybe he's making his own case to go higher than that as well. But yeah, I mean, it's a fun group, obviously, so it's hard to really compare these people. I guess you're right. With Hughes, the one thing holding him back is that now the Devils also have Nico Hischier on a separate line. That's also so amazing. So they don't need to like roll him out as often as, say, like Colorado needs to roll out Rantanen. Wait till we get to our Colorado talk and you hear what their second line is right now. This is the defending Stanley Cup champ has like no depth, at least in terms of star power. It's very interesting right now with a couple injuries. Anyways, of course, with Hughes rolling, you're going to want to look at who his line mates are. And currently they have been Dawson Mercer and Erik Haula. So Mercer is the most exciting one because he's also been on the top power play. Mercer is up to 5 points in his last 4 games after he had 2 assists on Saturday. Like I said, on the top power play. I feel like if this deployment holds, and it might not, right? Mercer has spent time on the third line. He has spent time not on the top power play, but I feel like as long as Mercer is L1, PP1, like you definitely want to get him, right? I don't know, Brian, how close we are to pause the pod, but he's on a hot streak. He's in a great spot. We were talking before about Thomas Tatar and how well he was doing on his line with Hischier, not on the top power play. So I think like Mercer becomes a lot more interesting than a Tatar type, right?
Yeah, like a lot more interesting. I'm not sure. Elon, I think maybe on par. Like Dawson Mercer has come in the past and Dawson Mercer has also gone. He's just come off also a 9-game stretch where he had just 6 shots total. But now that Dawson Mercer has 4 shots in each of his last 2 games, yeah, there's reason to wonder, hey, is there something more that he can do that we're going to see, especially with this top power play deployment? By the way, those 8 shots over Mercer's last 2 games, that's nearly 20% of his full season shot total in just 2 games, like 10% or yeah, right around there of the season. And if you're looking to see, well, is Dawson Mercer going to hold on the top power play? He took the spot of Nathan Bastian. So it feels like there's a pretty decent chance Dawson Mercer can hold on to this top power play deployment. That would be great if he could. And I think he needs it to be relevant. And even then, like, I don't know, Mercer's been the kind of guy who looks like a must have for 2 or 3 games at a time and then slowly peters out in a way that, at least this is my experience with him, like he peters out in a way that makes him hard to drop. So you hold on thinking there might be more to come, but ultimately you're unrewarded and you could probably have done better if you cut ties sooner. But listen, top power play changes that a bit, and the sudden shots on goal, and he's playing with Jack Hughes, which he has done before, and it hasn't always been a slam dunk. But I think maybe a good comp for Mercer right now could be like an Alex Killorn type, except I think Mercer is more naturally talented, so he's got that working in his favor as well. So I don't know if it's a pause the pod moment, but it definitely is. At least add him to your watch list. Sorry. But it definitely is at least a pause the pod to add Mercer to your watch list moment.
Yeah, well, he plays Monday, right? So if you have a lot of moves, then you might as well get him for Monday, and you could always reassess after that. Yeah, and he's only 21 years old. So like, it's fun when you say like your experiences with him so far. These are very limited experiences. Obviously, we'll learn a lot more about him as we get more games under our belt for more data. And then yeah, for your deeper leagues, Erik Haula, nothing, right? Like 2 assists. Sorry, nothing. Assists in each of his last 2 games. So yeah, also worth looking at in deeper leagues. Just get one of those players with exposure to Jack Hughes. Okay, next up in the list of, again, I'm not going to do this every time, okay? The cupful scoring leaders over Friday and Saturday of those 2 games. Remember, Friday, like every team played. And then a lot of these teams also played on Saturday. So next up, we're going to go to Jordan Kyrou on St. Louis. He had a goal and an assist on Friday versus Tampa Bay, and then 2 goals in the 5-4 win over Florida on Saturday. He had 12 shots over those 2 games. So shooting up a storm, getting multi-point games. Kyrou is now up to 13 points in his last 8 games after a very slow start to the year. Kyrou only had 3 points in 9 games. You could have gotten him so cheap. You dummies. How could you not have? Trust me, I'm with you. I didn't trade for him either. I wish I did. He's playing with Buchnevich and Rob Thomas at even strength and on the power play. It's kind of like, I don't even want to say top power play. They basically have 2 even power plays. But yeah, like Kyrou was point per game last season. And like Hughes, he's also shooting a ton more this year than he did last year. Kairu's up to 3.5 shots per game versus 2.5 shots per game last year. So, Brian, do you think Jordan Kyrou is going to beat last season's totals, which were very impressive? They were point per game. Do you think he could do even better than that now that he's shooting more?
It's an amazing conversation to be having about Jordan Kyrou. The script has been flipped so hard. Like you said, Elon, I think he's at 3 points in 9 games. I'll go even further. He had a stretch to start the season before he got hot 8 games ago. Jordan Kyrou had just 5 points over 13 games. But yeah, now, like you said, 13 points in 8 games for Kyrou looks really good. He's on one of 2 like evenly deployed power play units. So that puts some kind of ceiling on just how much Kyrou can accomplish. The same way we talk about like the situation in Ottawa, although maybe that's not the best example because they're struggling over there too now. But, if your power play unit is out there only half the time, then there's only so much you can accomplish. You're not looking at 25 power play points as a likely outcome of that. So keep that in mind when you're trying to think of what Kyrou can do the rest of the season. But his whole line, like even with this tear, they're still shooting just 8% on ice at 5-on-5, which shows you just how unlucky they were for the first long stretch of the year. And that's why I'm looking at Kyrou now being up to a 70-point pace and thinking, yeah, there is still room to grow here. Kyrou also, I should mention, had 19 power play points last season, even though he saw on average 40% share of his team's power play time. But of course, it wasn't so cut and dry with the way lines were deployed and where he was at various points in the season. Like, I still think there may be problems in St. Louis that could keep Kyrou from being a point per game player. But at the moment, at least there are goals being scored, to put it so simply. They have one piece figured out. It seems like the Blues have not put it all together. But now that the goals are coming, I'm optimistic that Kyrou can be at least a 70-point player. And yeah, I think he could go as high as point per game.
Yeah, I mean, he was last year, and we'll see now if they can get a bit luckier and maybe be a little bit better. Yeah, obviously, I could have also brought up like Buchnevich or Rob Thomas here. I guess the answer for Kyrou probably also fits for them. There are 2 injuries to watch, though, in St. Louis. The Blues finished that last game versus Florida without Braden Shen and without Robert Thomas. So Shen missed the entire third. Thomas didn't play only the last 5 minutes. I don't think we've seen an update yet. So we're going to have to watch the lines on Monday. But, keep an eye out. Like if Thomas is out, obviously that makes a big impact because he's the guy playing with Kyrou and Buchnevich. I don't know if Ryan O'Reilly moves up there or someone else. Even with Braden Shen out, that's an opportunity for like a Josh Levo or a Noel Achari to get a decent spot. So depending how deep your league is, like obviously I'm going to be watching GameDayLines.com very closely to see what's going on in St. Louis, both for the news and then for the updated line combos.
I think you mean GameDayTweets.com.
Game Day Tweets. What did I say? GameDayLines.com. I wish I could get that website, but that wasn't available. If you own GameDayLines.com, hit me up. But yeah, for all of us, we're going to go to Game Day Tweets, which I think is a pretty good domain, all things considered. I'm happy with it. If anyone wants to buy it from me, too bad. I'm not selling it. I like it. But okay, next up, Jason Robertson comes third. We already covered him Thursday. I don't know, Brian, do you have anything to add to like how Ben and I just drooled over him and said he's like amazing, and yeah, he belongs in that group with those top guys. Since we had that conversation, another 2 goals and 2 assists in 2 games. So no biggie for him at this point. No surprise. Jason Robertson's unbelievable. He's
awesome. He's amazing. He's crushing it. We had someone on our patrons only Discord group asking if they should maybe the Robertson line is overperforming a bit. Should they trade him for Kirill Kaprizov? And I was like, I don't think so. And I couldn't believe I was saying that. Or actually, I could believe it because I've been hyping Robertson for a while. I've been in his corner for sure. But even still, thinking that Robertson has entered that territory, and I think he has. And that's where we're at. And again, maybe it's sort of like a Hughes Kucherov situation where maybe Kaprizov's ceiling is even higher, but Robertson with all those goals, how can you look away? And his shot rates on the power play are insane. I've never seen, in all the times I'm looking, this guy, if he was on the ice, if Robertson was on the ice for 60 minutes of power play time, he would attempt 50 shots. That's almost 1 shot attempt a minute, which is wild. Usually a prolific power play producer will attempt 23 shots per 60 minutes. So this is twice what that general top end power play shooter does. So just another slice of just how great Jason Robertson has been this season. I have nothing to say. I'm just joining the drool party.
Yeah, I mean, I guess the other guy we can talk about on Dallas that's a little more interesting than just talking about Jason Robertson, because yeah, I think I could say like Joe Pavelski's doing well, like Rope Hintz is doing well, like these aren't big surprises considering they're all playing with Jason Robertson. Not to take away obviously from Pavelski and Hintz. Hintz actually pointless in his last 2 games, but definitely I'm not worried about that. But I guess like Jamie Benn is someone we can talk about who's like on this list. Where do I have him here? Number 26 on this list of like top couple point getters over Friday and Saturday, because Jamie Benn just keeps on going, and I feel like, Brian, we brought him up a couple weeks ago when he was on that hot streak. And correct me if I'm wrong, I think you were like, enjoy it while it lasts, but like it's probably not going to continue forever. And like it made sense. I mean, considering what we've seen from Ben over these last few seasons. But yeah, he has 2 multi-point games in this past week. He was pointless versus Colorado finally on Saturday. But before that, like if you look at his game log, it's like all multi-point games over these past couple of weeks. This guy's insane. He has 21 points in his last 13. He's up to 24 points in 22 games on the season, above a point per game. He's not like on that top line, but of course he is on that top power play with Hintz, Pavelski, and the great Jason Robertson and Heiskanen. And he's really taking advantage. He already has 11 power play points, like a quarter of the way into the season. So yeah, he had 11 power play points like all of last season, just to put that into context.
Yeah, well, last week I trotted out the notion of Jamie Benn being this power play specialist that he's evolved into, barely playing it 5-on-5, getting out on the top power play and crushing it. And that's borne out still. Like you said, I shouldn't. My call was don't expect it to last, but I said the power play points could still keep coming. Even with those power play points, you might not expect a whole lot more than 50 points from Jamie Benn if that's the only way he's producing, which at 5-on-5, he spent significant time in the last game with Ty Dellandrea and Wyatt Johnston. So I guess that's like line 3 in Dallas. Guryanov took his spot on the second line, which, may also not be a permanent thing, but just speaks to how where Jamie Benn is going to score is on the power play. He has 4 points in his last 3 games. 2 of those 4 points have come on the power play, which means I'm surprised about the other 2 even strength points that he's picked up in 3 games, but not about the power play piece. In a league that rewards, that has a power play points category, then I think Jamie Benn, like, it could be worth it for that alone, depending on how deep it is. So yeah, just I don't want to think the take was he's going to cool off and disappear and be irrelevant. I think Jamie Benn, because of this power play role he's got that he's doing so well in, could hold relevance for people who really value those power play contributions.
Yeah. And also, like, it's pretty funny because he's getting so buried in the conversation, but Tyler Seguin, like, not on the top power play, still has 18 points in 22 games. Like, he's quietly having a great season himself. And that's only with 3 power play points. If he's doing it all, even imagine if Seguin got a shot on that top power play. Like, if Ben gets injured and Seguin gets up there, I mean, you probably won't be able to add him because he's probably taking all leagues, but it's nice to see this bounce back, right? We saw Jonathan Taves have somewhat of a bounce back this season, but yeah, like Tyler Seguin, like at a much higher extent, considering like at some point Tyler Seguin was getting dropped in some of my leagues last year. So yeah, Dallas looking pretty good. I think Dallas is going to be a tough team to beat with all this firepower.
Yeah, maybe a bit of crow to eat, because when Pete DeBoer was hired there, it was kind of like a disappointment. It's like here comes another defensive coach. I mean, they were moving on though from Rick Bowness, so I guess what this shows us is that maybe Rick Bowness and his emphasis or obsession with defense first hockey, even like relative to Pete DeBoer, was kind of intense, and that Pete DeBoer being behind the bench has let the reins loose on a bit more offense being able to happen. And I'm just taking a peek at Tyler Seguin's numbers too, and what he's doing looks pretty solid too. And like you said, Elon, without any like substantial power play contributions either, I mean, 60 points seems easy for him at this point. The question is, can he stick above 65 as he is so far? Great season. Great things happening in Dallas. It's nice. Yeah. It's been so long, although Seguin isn't shooting, but hey, take what you can get.
Yeah, now I'm kind of feeling like, should we talk about more Dallas players? But I guess that's pretty much it, right? I guess Mason Marchment really fell off. He's turned into kind of a bust. But aside from him and Heiskanen, I think I have Heiskanen scheduled, so I might as well bring him up as well. Why not? Yeah, Heiskanen, 2 assists and 6 shots versus Winnipeg, then 1 assist in the 4-1 loss to Colorado yesterday. So he was pointless for 4 games before that. I believe Ben and I talked about him on short shifts about that 4-game pointless streak. And I'm not going to brag because it was pretty obvious, but I was like, don't worry about it. Like, clearly this is just a blip. And now we see he's back. He's on this power play. Brian's just talking about how amazing it is and how Jamie Benn is contributing. Obviously, the quarterback there is going to do really well as well. And plus he gets like a ton of time to even strength. So Heiskanen also living up to his draft stock and pedigree and hype.
Yeah, on pace for 65 points on that really strong power play. He's up to shot rates a little bit too, and is being leaned on heavily, of course, on all special teams, which isn't really helping much. Like I thought maybe he'd throw a few more, he'd get a couple more blocks, but that's not his game. And I'm glad it's not. We don't need Heiskanen throwing himself in the line of fire too often. So Elon, I'm just with you. Just enjoy the season from Miro Heiskanen that he's having. And this was after, am I remembering right? Yeah, he had a bit of a slow start too, right? He had just 3 points in his first 6 games. Then he just rattled off a ton of fantastic games. And just like that, he's up to a 65-point pace.
Way to go, Heiskanen. It's fun. And Erik Karlsson's having a great season. Remember back when Karlsson was going to get traded and there was like, I remember we had a debate on the show of like whether Dallas should trade Heiskanen for Erik Karlsson. I don't know. It's fun to see them both doing well. Anyways, whatever. That's old news. Let's go to Toronto now. Okay. No more Dallas talk for the rest of the show. I don't want any more mention of the Dallas Stars. We've given them so much time. I don't know why I'm like all of a sudden being against them. Okay. The Leafs, because no podcast talk about the Leafs. So we definitely need to give them some time now to make up for it. And yeah, the next players on the list here are Mitch Marner and Austin Matthews. And then Nylander is not too far behind. Leafs definitely had a productive couple games on Friday and Saturday versus Pittsburgh and Minnesota. They scored 4 goals in each of those 2 wins. We actually had a question though from Edge. He's a little bit concerned about Austin Matthews. He wrote, any concerns about Matthews' scoring pace? By the way, this was on our patron Discord server. I take questions from the patrons. I always like post whenever, Saturday when I'm preparing for the show. I'm like, if you have a player you want us to talk about, bring him up and I'll do my best to fit him into the show. So I guess another perk of becoming a patron if you're interested at keepingkarlsson.com/patron. But yeah, Edge, any concern about Matthew's scoring pace? Currently playing at a 34 goal pace and roughly 78 points. Shooting percentage still low, almost 10% versus career 16%, still recorded the way through the season. When do we readjust our expectations? And then Edge wrote a lot of more interesting things in his own analysis. So I guess the patrons could go and see more of that question. But yeah, Brian, I'll just throw it to you now. Obviously, it helps that since this question was asked, Matthews had a goal and 2 assists versus Pittsburgh after going pointless for a couple games. But yeah, even still, you look at his totals, 10 goals and 24 points in 23 games. So that's a 37 goal, 86 point pace now, which is good, but not like second overall in fantasy drafts. Like people were debating whether to take Draisaitl or Austin Matthews. Clearly the answer has been Draisaitl by far so far. So are you at a point, Brian, where you think that if you were redrafting now, it's like Draisaitl, obviously, or do you think Matthews is just as good as you thought he was going into the season? And that debate still should be there of who should go second overall in these fantasy drafts.
That one, the second one, I think as crazy as it sounds, I'll still take Austin Matthews. I would. I really would. I mean it. Thank goodness, by the way, like Matthews' season would be even more dire if it weren't for his power play production. He has 11 power play points in 23 games, so pacing for about 40 power play points, which is almost 10 more than he had last year. And maybe that's not going to totally sustain, but at least for now, that covers up the fact that Matthews' 5-on-5 production rates have basically been halved. And I think you can chalk that up entirely IMO to him having just a 6% shooting percentage at 5-on-5, which is less than half of what we'd expect him to be achieving. Like this, Austin Matthews, he's an extremely consistent high-end goal scorer. He's been that way for 3 years now. This is a blip. I wouldn't adjust expectations. I guess the one thing that I will put out there is he's been separated from Mitch Marner, right? And that's where he's had the majority of his success with. So there's this difference in deployment, and I don't know if that does have some kind of impact on the end result, but I can tell you so far in Matthew's underlying numbers, nothing's showing, right? So if it's a chemistry thing, maybe those who watch a lot of Leafs hockey have noticed some kind of eye test. Like, let us know at Keeping Karlsson. Tweet at us if you've seen anything. But as far as I'm concerned, I can't get too worried about Austin Matthews. If you can somehow buy low, like if I had Draisaitl, I think I might offer him up for Matthews.
I don't think I would.
Yeah, like it would be a bit risky, but especially
why do it? Like, I feel like the upside is the same. Like, here's a more interesting one. What if you have Jason Robertson, who is just getting like 5, 6, 8 shots per game, like scorching, or you would toss away. I would
try and get more, right? Like I would try
to get more than Matthews for Robertson.
Like I try and I know it's crazy.
Come on, Brian.
Yeah. If you get like a sweetener or a pick, that was you're right. It's unlikely.
That's already a bold move to offer Robertson.
Yeah. I have an unreasonable view of trades. Like I suck at it.
Okay. But you're saying if you have Robertson, you should offer him for Matthews right now? Or are you thinking like you'd at least think about it? Or is it like obvious?
I would do that. I would take that swing.
Okay. I mean, makes sense at the start of the year. Matthews was like like far and away the best, even though Robertson was having that contract dispute. Yeah, it'll be fun next year once the dust settles to see where all these players land and what we're expecting for like next year's results. But yeah, I agree with you. Like Matthews will be fine. It's just like for Matthews to be fine, like to our expectations, like I was expecting him to win the Rocket Richard like running away. And now it's like going to be really hard for him to win it at this point. He's so far behind. But yeah, that's Matthews. Marner also, like Dave Bedden brought up on the stream scheme that we just dropped yesterday, that he's a bit upset about what Marner's been doing so far. He had a goal and assist versus Pittsburgh on Saturday, which helped. But before that, he was hovering around a 90-ish point pace, which is fine. But last season, he pays for 110. And his shot on goal totals are down actually from 3.1 per game last year to only 2.3 this year. So it's kind of like the same question as for Matthews. And now that you've pointed out that Marner is playing away from Matthews. Yeah, Marner's been playing with Tavares and Matthews has been playing with Nylander and Michael Bunting. Is that like something to be concerned about with Marner? Again, not that he's going to fall off completely, but maybe is he only a 90-point guy now as opposed to being the 100+ guy that he was last year?
Yeah, this is a tough one because, as you mentioned, there's some underlying indicators there for Mitch Marner that he's not playing as well, or like he's not doing as much as he has in the past to get him those 100+ points. I think it's kind of a similar story to Austin Matthews, like great power play production, but his 5-on-5 production is flagging. But whereas for Matthews, I was like, yeah, I see a lot of reasons why this is just unfortunate variance. With Marner, I see these shot rates that are down, as you sort of hinted at already, and Marner's shooting percentage is up at the same time, which is not really a formula we like to see, right? You can cover lower shot rates with a higher shooting percentage, but that doesn't mean that higher shooting percentage is going to keep up. Sometimes it might mean you're being more selective or selecting better shots to take, but that's not the case from what I'm seeing in Marner's expected goals numbers, which are down at the lowest they've ever been. Like they're in extremely meh territory, actually, far below what I would expect to see from a high-end forward. Like Marner's expected goals numbers were never as high as like an elite goal scorer, but they were still good, like a supporting top 3 or top 6 goal scorer. But this year, not so much. The on ice numbers for Marner are also down compared to the last couple of years too. You know, again, Marner and Matthews struggled out of the gate, and I think there's an adjustment, having tried to tinker and tweak and fix what was happening there. And now that Marner's away from Matthews and onto a line with Tavares and Kerfoot, maybe there's more adjustments still happening. So yeah, I think it's a little underwhelming to have drafted Mitch Marner, even though he's still on a 96 point pace. It's not quite in the way you would have expected or hoped. And I don't know if and when he and Austin Matthews are going to get reunited either. So we'll have to keep tabs on this to see, because if this lasts all season and goes into next, then it's time to reevaluate where we have Mitch Marner in our drafts, like bump him down a little. But yeah, if there's one guy I'm worried about a little more between Matthews and Marner, it's probably Marner. And it's still minor. Like the difference we're talking about is not huge. Don't panic about Mitch Marner. It's just not as rosy as we'd hoped.
I mean, yeah, he is on like an insane point pace right now in terms of like, or point streak, I should say. He like hasn't gone a game without getting at least an assist since October 24th. So,
it's all relative.
Yeah, it's all relative, of course. Like you're not upset with Marner, but it was just I noticed that Dave brought him up in stream scheme, and I was like, wait, what's the problem with Marner? And I looked, and yeah, he's a bit below his pace from last year. But yeah, I'm not that concerned. Though it would be nicer to have him with Matthews. Though, hey, the guy who is playing with Matthews instead has been William Nylander, who that's great for him. He's up to 24 points in 23 games on the season. I feel like there's no reason why he can't top point per game if he's getting this top line, top power play deployment all season long. Though I guess one other thing about the Leafs that was already discussed on short shifts on Tuesday, and I believe again on Thursday a little bit mentioned, but yeah, this Morgan Riley injury is big news, and everyone really lost their minds, I think, like rushing to grab Mark Giordano because they expected he'll get top power play, because I think he did get on the top power play in the game where Riley got hurt. And then all of a sudden the news came out, oh, it's Rasmus Sandin that's practicing on the top power play. And so people switched over from Giordano to Sandin. At the end, like neither guy was that exciting, to be honest. Like Sandin is pointless in 3 games since joining PP1, just 2 shots over that stretch. It's been +4 for what it's worth. So maybe he could have gotten some. He was on the ice for goals clearly and just didn't get in on them. Giordano had an assist versus Minnesota, which is nice. Like, but I'm curious to get your take now on these defensemen, because Morgan Riley's out for a while. This is a very plum spot to be on the top power play with all of these superstars. Are you like, I'd imagine these guys are going to start getting dropped if once the excitement wanes and there's new exciting defensemen that people want to go after. So what's your current hype level on PP1 Rasmus Sandin and extra TOI Mark Giordano after this injury?
It's about as low as you're kind of setting it up to be. And I'm someone who quickly added Mark Giordano when I heard that Riley was moved to injured reserve. And then I was like, oh no, Sandin's going to be the top power play guy. So I swapped him out for Rasmus Sandin. I didn't realize that Rasmus Sandin was in the penalty box for that one power play that happened after Morgan Riley was injured that Giordano played on. So that's on me. And actually, I really could have used that move this week because I have 3 Predators on my roster. So I've lost a lot of games played from the flooding delays at Bridgestone Arena that also took out my Nathan McKinnon. Sorry, there's my little vent for the week. I'm probably going to lose by roughly the amount of production I lost from those postponed games. And I hope they happen still at another fantasy relevant moment. But in terms of fantasy relevant moments for Sandin and Giordano, yeah, like, Elon, even when I was writing you about it, as things were happening, we both acknowledge that there is a scenario where neither guy actually holds a lot of relevance. They both play more minutes and they're on the ice more, but neither one really gets to benefit and step in to do what Morgan Riley did. But I guess I'm not surprised that Sandin and Giordano, I'm disappointed, but I'm not surprised that Rasmus Sandin and Mark Giordano could not do that and fill Riley's skates. It's still a good place to be. Like, I wouldn't just cut these guys for the sake of cutting them and add someone like really deep instead. I think especially Sandin on the top power play unit, assuming he continues there, is worth it just for the chance that he gets a point. But like that's my overall feel. I'm disappointed that I gave up 2 moves to add both of these guys, only keep one when 0 of them were actually worth rostering.
Yeah, like I think that Sandin could easily get like an assist or 2 next week in 3 games. So yeah, it's worth rostering.
Yeah.
And he's good for hits. So it really counts that significantly. You know what's really annoying, by the way? I'm in a very close matchup myself, Brian Cupful, and I've got Mark Scheifele over on Winnipeg, who's like pointless and forever. And Winnipeg has scored 2 goals in this game. And the goal scores I'm just seeing now are Jansen Harkins from Lowry and Michael Asimont, and then Saku Manalainen, assisted by Morgan Barron and Dominic Tonnet Nato. Like, what? Why?
Wow, you really crushed those names.
Who are these people? I didn't even know they were in the NHL. And
we had someone on our Discord who was like, guess who? Like, there was a goal scored by Michael Asimont, and someone was like, guess what team this guy plays for? And yeah. I don't think anyone knew. Like, I didn't know. I saw the gif of the goal and I was like, oh, okay, he plays for Winnipeg. But I had no idea.
Yeah, well, did you know Saku Manalainen?
I think it's Manalainen.
I don't know. Well, maybe we'll find. So, Brian, any interest in Saku? Oh, no, just kidding. But yeah, I'm just frustrated because it's been a while now for Mark. Can we just jump to quickly Mark Scheifele talk? Where is he? Like, Winnipeg switched things up. They've moved Scheifele now to play with Wheeler and Perfetti instead of with Kyle Connor, which feels like not great. I don't know if you could say that like Wheeler and Perfetti have gone to line 1 or if Scheifele's gone to line 2. But he and Dubois have swapped. They're beating Chicago today for what it's worth. But yeah, no thanks to Scheifele, at least for my fantasy team. I don't know. Should I be worried or just like, is this just a cold stretch that's going to cost me a matchup, but whatever?
A little worried about Mark Scheifele, and it is because he's moved off that top line. Like, I don't like Scheifele playing away from Connor. Scheifele actually looks fine himself. He's actually even shooting more at 5-on-5 than he has in the past. And like, I see a world where Scheifele is a buy low. Here's a couple of reasons. Like, and this is to console you, Elon. Like, Scheifele usually paces for huge power play points, like not huge, but good. Usually in the mid 20s, but this year Scheifele has just 3 power play points in 19 games. That's about half what we'd expect from him by now. So give him those. And Scheifele isn't quite at point per game, but he's closer. That would give him, in this imaginary world, 17 points in 19 games. And then you look at his on-ice shooting percentage, which is currently below 7%, and say, well, that'll regress. And there you go. Bam, Scheifele point per game player. So I see paths of regression where Scheifele is just who he's always been, with some more shots. But the thing is, and this nagging thing to me is, I still just don't really love Scheifele playing on what I think is, very decidedly a second line. Wheeler is not who he once was. Cole Perfetti is not who he will one day be. Could Scheifele produce on that second line? Sure. And he's still on the top power play, but again, this marked drop from the top line. And if Ehlers was coming back soon, it would be like, well, okay, when Ehlers comes back, that improves the chances that he's going to have a world-class line mate, but that return is not quite in sight yet. So I can't even really get my hopes up. But just regression purely, Scheifele looks good. but deployment wise, I'm not loving where he's at.
Right. Okay. So we'll have to wait and see if maybe that changes because it's a new development. By the way, okay, back to Toronto, just to tie a bow on them. So I mentioned that Nylander is playing with Matthews and Bunting, leaving Marner with Tavares. And there is a third person on that line, and his name is Calle Yarncroc. That's a good spot for him. He had a goal actually versus Minnesota and then an assist versus Pittsburgh. So if you're in a deep enough league, this is a guy getting a good deployment. Wanted to make sure to throw his name out there. But with that, Brian, we were pretty far down the list. I think we're having a good time, but I think it's also time to take a little bit of a break. So we'll be back in just a sec after some words from our sponsors. You're listening to Keeping Karlsson. All right, Brian, we are back and we're going down this list of the players who had the most couple points over Friday and Saturday, which sounds like kind of a janky theme for the episode the more I say it. But I think it's just leading us to fun player discussion, which is really what it's all about, right? These themes are just giving me something to tie it together. But next up, actually, in between Matthews and Marner and then Nylander, there is a guy who was ahead of them, and that's Kevin Hayes, who's continuing his monster season with Philly. He had a goal versus Pittsburgh on Friday, 2 assists versus the Islanders in the 5-2 loss on Saturdays. That brought Kevin Hayes to 22 points in 22 games, point per game. Kevin Hayes, is there any chance this is sustainable? Like we knew when the season started and Couturier was going to be out that, good opportunity for Kevin Hayes. I thought of him like a David Krejci, like, hey, this guy's going to probably be pretty decent. And Krejci also having an insane season, as we'll talk about in a little bit. So these guys, I don't know. I feel like I had a hunch that he'll be decent, but nothing like this. This is insane.
Yeah, he's been amazing. It's almost like Kevin Hayes is who we hoped Sean Couturier could be this year. And it's kind of a wild thing because Sean Couturier, has come up as always been someone with huge upside, big pedigree. And Kevin Hayes has been this other type of player who's not quite a journeyman, but has never really been given top-notch deployment to show what he can do. And when he has, he's looked good, but he's never consistently earned it. And here he is in Philly. He's like the last centerman standing. He's doing so good. Elon, do you remember when I offered you Kevin Hayes for Evan Bouchard straight up in a trade? You scoffed.
I ended up trading Bouchard for an injured Teravainen. So do you think I should have done the move for Hayes, or do you think I should be happier to have Teravainen?
It depends on what you do with that roster spot in the meantime, I think. Yeah. I think you probably could have, like, Teravainen might do as well as Hayes. I mean,
if I knew that Hayes was going to continue doing what he's been doing, then I guess I blew it.
Me too. And if I knew how Bouchard would continue to struggle and not take over the top power play, I wouldn't have made that offer. But that's how the cookie crumbles, huh? I mean, Kevin Hayes in Philly, could he keep this up? His own ice shooting percentage is kind of high, 12%, but he has 7 power play points already, which is 4 away from matching his own career high. He's pacing for 26 power play points. And the Philadelphia power play, I don't want to speak too soon, but may actually be capable of supporting that. And Kevin Hayes is doing all this, of course, with career high time on ice, the biggest role he's ever had. So yeah, I'm curious to see, like, we thought Couturier coming into the season could get, 65 points. Right now, Hayes, even with regression, is slated to do at least that or about that. So I want to see how far Kevin Hayes can take this. I'm not totally surprised he's succeeding, but I am still kind of surprised because we didn't see this kind of fantasy potential happening in Philly this year, but Kevin Hayes proven us wrong.
Yeah. So if he's not even rostered in like so many, like compare like a point per game player. And I believe I'm just bringing it up now. Yeah. He's rostered in only 24% like of Yahoo leagues, which is like, yeah, even if you don't think he'll keep this up, I feel like you want a point per game player on your team. That's a top power play center. I think you should probably grab him. Tweet at us at Keeping Karlsson. Let us know who your options are to drop for Kevin Hayes. Must be a lot of shallow leagues out there. I was even meant for your deeper leagues. A guy playing with Hayes lately has been Joel Farabee, and he scored a goal on Saturday. He has a quiet 8 points in his last 11 games. Farabee's been doing pretty good. As a guy who had a lot of buzz when he first came up into the league. A couple of weeks ago, the buzz in Philly was about Owen Tippett, who was producing and getting really great deployment, but he's really slowed down lately. So I think if you're still holding Owen Tippett, you probably want to swap for Joel Farabee, right? I'd consider Farabee the second best flyer forward to roster at the moment, aside from Konechny, of course. Where is Konechny, by the way? He's injured again?
He's injured.
Yeah, always. Yeah. Philly sucks. Like, everyone's injured all the time.
He's been gone a little while. Yeah, like, you're asking if we should swap out Farabee for Tippett. Yes and no. Like, Farabee's on the second power play, not a ton of shots. He's not the sort of guy who looks like he can do much sustainably. So I'd say if Owen Tippett for you was a short-term stream, yeah, you could swap him out for Joel Farabee. but I wouldn't see Farabee as someone who could have like a lasting presence on your roster because he's really frustrating on nights where he doesn't produce. You can't expect much. Deeper leagues, short-term streams, that's where you're looking at Joel Farabee. Meanwhile, Owen Tippett, remember when I pointed out last week that he was seeing consistently high time on ice and maybe he'd earned Tortorella's trust, which was so freaking impressive for someone, in Owen Tippett's position. Well, since then, he's dropped from seeing about 20 minutes a night to 15 and then 14 and a half minutes in Tippett's last two outings. Some of that is because he's had less power play time and like the team has had less power play time, but Tippett is also like, yeah, he's been bad. He hasn't been playing well. Just one shot total over his last 3 games. That's not good. But what I'm saying here is if I had to commit to one for the rest of the season, I'd commit to Tippett over Farabee. If I wanted to commit to one over the next like 4 days, I think I'd prefer Farabee or at least call it a push.
Yeah, I think I'd take Farabee over Tippett for the rest of the season just because he's had more time to establish himself. But we're probably splitting hairs here. So let's go now to Washington. Next up on the list here is Alex Ovechkin, who's really heated up after a slow start to the season. And of course, when I say slow start, I mean by his standards. But yeah, Ovi's up to 7 points in his last 5 games. He had 8 shots in the 5-1 loss to New Jersey yesterday. So no points, but he didn't get... Wait, Brian, I did an ad break. Where were you?
Oh, really?
Remember I said we'll do a word from our sponsors? You're listening to Keeping Karlsson? Like,
no.
After Toronto? Okay. What an odd thing. All right.
Sorry.
Okay. I am discombobulated now. All right. Next up, let's go to Washington. Next up on the list is Alex Ovechkin, who's heated up after a slow start. And of course, when I say slow start, I mean by Ovi's standards. Yeah, 7 points in his last 5 games. And that includes a game where he had no points, but 8 shots in that 5-1 loss to New Jersey on Saturday, but he just couldn't get anything by Vitek Vanacek, who can lately. But yeah, Ovi's still overall only pacing for 39 goals. My bet is he pushes it to 45 by the end of the season. Oh, I don't know. Like, I feel like just never doubt Ovi. That's probably just a good policy to have. And I guess we had a question in Washington about John Karlsson. Julian wanted us to talk about him, saying the shots have been crazy lately and he's been getting good point totals since his injury. Is it sustainable though? So yeah, he's actually been kind of quiet offensively lately in terms of the production, but he had a power play goal yesterday. That was his first point in 5 games. Karlsson's now pacing for 58 points on the season, where he was at 75 last year. But yeah, Julian definitely does point out that he's taking 3.7 shots per game now after 6 shots on Saturday, generally more of a 2.5 shots per game guy. So do you think, Brian, this all evens out to Karlsson going back to what he did last year once he even out this cold streak, but all these shots?
Yeah, I think so. I think it's nice for anybody waiting for the points to start coming that Karlsson, his shot rates have definitely gone up. And this is after, by the way, Karlsson had been shooting at the same rates since 2014-15. Like this is a marked change of someone who's been doing the same thing for the last 7 or 8 years. He was averaging 3 shots per game before his injury. Now Karlsson is averaging more than 4 shots a game since. When the thrust of the question on our Discord server was, is it sustainable? And yeah, I don't know, but it's a really good thing to notice. This is, 17 games after 8 years of doing, like I said, the same sort of shot rates, which are always good, but never this good. So, good to notice. We'll watch. As for points for Karlsson, I think there's some on-ice shooting percentage struggles happening at 5-on-5. Also, the power play hasn't been scoring as well as it probably should be or have been so far. So I think I'm still with Karlsson being able to get around the 70-point pace rest of season. I think that's pretty reasonable, give or take 5 points. And like I said, those shots are nice for anybody waiting on those points to come.
Yeah, and then there were those 2 big TJ Oshie games when he returned from his injury before he had a goose egg on Saturday. I talked about Oshie with Ben, and Ben predicted that Oshie wouldn't be able to keep up the production coming back from injury, and he said basically he's borderline replacement level in fantasy like he was last year. Are you with him? Like Oshie not that exciting, or is he someone that if he's in free agency you're jumping on?
No, I'm not that excited. It depends on what your league values, right? Like Oshie could approach 70 points or he could fall short of 60. The thing that makes him not exciting is that there aren't a ton of goals coming from him and he's shooting less than he ever has, just 1.5 shots per game from Oshie, which elicits the big meh. I think he could be a decent steady-ish presence in the middle or bottom of your roster. But, your question was, would I care to pursue him? Not really. He's never excited me. So I'm kind of on the same page as Ben here. The one thing about Oshie is he's hitting now, apparently 12 hits in his last 3 games, including a 7-hit game. He's up to 3 hits per game versus, he's usually not even hit 2 hits per game for his whole career. He's kind of hitting it twice the rate as he has before. So like John Carlson's shots, we'll see what happens with this trend. But if hits help you and you like the point upside, even though they're kind of like boring points, if there is such a thing, then you might be a little more interested in TJ Oshie than the rest.
Okay, so next up in the list, we have Miro Heiskanen, who we've already covered, and then another defenseman in Shea Theodore. Brian, I don't think we've talked much Shea this season. It's been an interesting season for him. He has 3 assists over his last 3 games. Wait, doesn't make sense. One sec. It'll just be 2 games. One sec. Sorry, everyone. I just don't want to say something incorrect on the show. How embarrassing
You're doing
would
great.
that be?
That's why
3 assists. Okay.
We all appreciate you.
Thank you. He's got 3 assists over his last couple games versus Seattle and Vancouver. Before that, he went pointless for a couple games, but then he had 2 assists versus Edmonton, getting a lot of assists, which is nice. He's up to 14 assists in 23 games this season, only 3 goals. So that's 17 points in 23 games for Shea Theodore, which is a 61 point pace, which is pretty good. But I guess one little concerning thing about him is he's been on the second power play this season. It's not like past seasons in Vegas where they've kind of had even power plays. I think it's like a pretty clear power play 1, right? The one with Eichel, Stone, Marchessault, and Stevenson is obviously power play 1. And that's been manned by Alex Pietrangelo, who's having like a huge season himself, 21 points in 23 games now. Though interestingly, these last 2 games where Theodore got 3 assists, Pietrangelo went quiet. So I don't know, maybe only one of them could get points at a time. Someone should go check and see how often it happens that both of them get a point at the same time in the same game. What if they're like a Clark Kent, Superman kind of thing? I don't know. Anyway, Brian, let's say you're drafting right now. You could have your choice of Vegas defenseman for the rest of the season in Cupful. Who would you take between Shea Theodore and Alex Pietrangelo?
Well, I have Shea Theodore, so full disclosure, but that's actually not going to keep me from picking Alex Pietrangelo. And here's why. I haven't loved what I've seen under the hood from Shea Theodore so far this season. His shot rates have dipped a bit, as has his, he's lost a minute per night at 5-on-5, and his power play role has dipped also from being on the top power player in the past, even part of like a 1A, 1B situation. He's on definitely what is the second power play unit this year. And yet Shea Theodore keeps producing, which is great. And I think the way he's done it, he's been in on more goals as a secondary assister than usual. That's helping him. But I'm kind of getting like Riley Smith vibes from Shea Theodore in the sense that Riley Smith has not had deployment that would suggest he can keep producing. However, he has somehow. And I see that that's what Shea Theodore has done. And I'm worried the clock will run out on him. I'm not sure it will, but I'm a little nervous. If you have Shea Theodore and you think you can sell him for full value right now, that's something I might go exploring. As for Alex Pietrangelo, I'll take him because he's the guy working the top power play unit. His current point pace for Pietrangelo, which is like at 65 points, it's a bit of a mirage because he's participating in too many even strength goals compared to his career numbers, or really any defenseman's career numbers. He's on 75% of all 5-on-5 goals scored while he's on the ice. His shot attempts have also dropped a little, but not his shots on goal. And I think maybe that we'll see the actual effect of that. Is sometimes, if you take fewer shot attempts, somehow they still all make it to the net. I don't know if that's going to hold up, but in any case, look, Pietrangelo and Theodore both have the benefit of having playing for a Vegas team that's producing more offense this year than they were in the past. But I would rather Pietrangelo over the 2. Top power play is going great. Pietrangelo is going great on it. Power play point every 3 games, 7 in 23. So I could see 60 points for Pietrangelo this year, and I'd put Theodore maybe in the 50 to 55 point range.
Yeah, and then Pietrangelo has a bit more of the peripherals, like the hits and blocks. So yeah, I think I'm with you there. All right, next up is Pavelski, who we've discussed. Then we get Ryan Pulock, who, like I said, had that crazy game, 4 assists versus Philly right after I dropped him. He was doing nothing before, and then now I drop him. And Fuego, right? Like a game of the year for Ryan Pulock, no question. Brian, do you think this game was a sign of things to come, or is he going to go back to zeros moving forward?
I think he's going back to zeros moving forward, or mostly zeros moving forward. Like nothing about Pulock suggests to me that he's underperforming on that 4 assist night. He had 2 power play assists from the second unit. That's nice. That doesn't ever happen though. Good luck getting 2 power play assists for the second unit over 20 games, let alone 1. The thing that Pulock does have going for him is he's lining up on an Isles team that is putting up some of its best offensive numbers on the score sheet and beneath it that it has for a while. But even with that, no, Elon, this is not a sign, in my opinion, of things to come from Ryan Pulock. If you dropped him, yeah, be sad that like he popped off maybe a game or 2 or 5 after you did, but I don't think you're scrambling to go re-add him to your team because of that big performance.
Okay. Yeah, and then next up, I guess I'll jump down the list a bit to some more Islanders, like Zach Parise and Brock Nelson come up at 17, 18 because they both had big games. We talked Peugeot on Thursday, who's on the power play, like top power play, I should say. Like, yeah, the Islanders will start scoring more goals this year, so it's very exciting, and all these guys are benefiting. Zach Parise popped a couple versus Philly on Saturday. Nelson has a goal in each of his last couple games. We had a question actually from our patron Joel. Could you discuss Brock Nelson and the Islanders, specifically Anders Lee and Barzal, which is a fun way of wording it, because like, what about specifically Brock Nelson? That's okay. We'll just do all three. They seem much more high scoring. Nelson's numbers seem unsustainable, but he also scored 37 goals last season. We brought up Nelson on a show a few weeks ago, and I was like very much in the camp of Brock Nelson is freaking for real. This guy is so good, and no one respects him. Like, he scored those 37 goals next year, and I feel like no one believes that he can do it again. But he's up to now 11 goals and 22 points in 23 games, so he's definitely on pace to hit that 37 goals again, if not more. Anders Lee is actually cold at the moment, only 1 assist in his last 4, but he's still at 19 points in 23 games on the season. He's playing with the great Brock Nelson, so I personally wouldn't be too worried about Anders Lee. Then yeah, Matt Barzal doing his thing on a separate line, 25 points in 23 games now. So I'm kind of like just into all three. I don't know, Brian, I'm sure you'll have a deeper analysis here. Maybe you'll have some cold water to throw, but I feel like, especially with the way people perceive these Islanders as being super boring, I feel like you, at any point, no matter how hot these players are, you could probably still get them for cheap in a trade. Especially, maybe not Barzal, just because he's kind of a big name, but like Brock Nelson and Anders Lee, I feel like you could always like sort of trade for them and end up getting a steal, because I'm into both of them.
Yeah, you might be able to. And it is like we should, as I just said about Pulock, the Isles are doing better offensively than they have in the past. They have about 7 more shot attempts per hour, a half a goal more per hour, and 0.3 of a goal more expected per hour than they have over the last 3 seasons. And that has come at some defensive expense, but we don't care about defense. We just want offense and fantasy production. But we said this, right, about Matt Barzal on the show last week, where it was, I looked into Barzal's numbers, and we're seeing incredible offensive numbers that we haven't seen from him before. And like, I'm talking under the hood, like we're really, I'm happy with what I'm seeing from Matt Barzal, and that's a first in a little while. And for Brock Nelson, I can say just about the same thing, although there are a couple more flags for him than there were for Barzal. First, at 5-on-5, the Owls are probably scoring too often. Like, you heard the discrepancy, or you might have noticed it, in actual goals scored for the Islanders versus their expected number. So yeah, there's a bit of a discrepancy there, and some of it is happening on Nelson's line, which means he's probably getting a couple more points than he should. Also, his own 5-on-5 shooting percentage, he shot 18% last year after a career of shooting 10 to 12%, and he hasn't really regressed from the 18% mark. So either something has changed that I can't find elsewhere in the numbers to prove that something has changed, or this is a guy who's like on borrowed time goal scoring. But one thing that does work in Brock Nelson's favor is he's been more engaged as a shooter on the power play, and that's helped him up above 3 shots per game, which is a nice little milestone for him to hit, as somebody who, used to be goal or bust, and now it's like, no, he's going to get you 3 shots and hopefully a goal too. Coming into the season, I would have expected maybe 60, 65 points from Brock Nelson. I can up that by like a 5-point range to 65 or 70 points. I like what I'm seeing. I'm open to maybe him being a 15% or higher shooter all of a sudden. We'll see if he can keep it up. The longer he keeps it up, the more convinced I'll be. We'll see if he can. I'm still a little skeptical. Anders Lee, his success is coming on the power play. 8 power play points in 23 games. Big success there. Also a guy that I'd say is, coming into the season, 60 points, and I'll also bump him up a little. So yeah, both these guys, all these Islanders, except Ryan Pulock, performing above projections, and I think to some extent reliably so.
Yeah, it's an exciting team. It'll be fun. And I think they've got like the front runner for the Vezina in net, which obviously helps in Sorokin. So I think that this Islanders team is going to be a fun team to watch. Should I call it right now? Islanders, Dallas Stars, Stanley Cup final. That would be too quick. No, it's going to be New Jersey probably, and Vegas. Okay, those will be my 2 picks. New Jersey and Dallas. Those are my picks. Okay, Stanley Cup finals. You've heard it here first. New Jersey and Dallas. What do you think? Do you have a current finals
I
prediction?
don't see Dallas taking Colorado. So but I could get behind your Eastern New Jersey candidate. Although I still think Toronto might find a way to get there.
Toronto. Okay, well, they've
Yeah.
got a long way to go.
Yeah.
It's hard to win a playoff series if you're a Leaf, but we'll see. And we'll also see about a bunch more players in this episode of Keeping Karlsson. But I think it's about time, Brian, to take a break and end part one here. But we've had a lot of fun, I think, covering some of the top performers over the last few days and some of them over the whole season. And yeah, we still have some players. We're going to go to Tampa. We're going to go to Arizona, Boston, Minnesota. Like, you could try to guess if you're a listener which players on these teams we're going to talk about, but obviously it's going to be some high performers. Like Minnesota, here's a tease: Kirill Kaprizov, very good. Who's centering him? It's still been Sam Steele. He scored a goal today. Are we still into Sam Steele? Discussions like that are coming, so make sure to go and download part 2, which should already be available to you. And until then, I don't know, have fun, good luck. And I never know how to end these halves. So Brian, say something to take us out of here.
We'll just push play on the next episode.
All right. Bye.
Bye. Until then, just if you're happy now, stay happy. It's probably like a 5-second gap. If it's longer, it's a little more work to stay happy, but you can do it. We're here for you.
Maybe I'll cut that whole.
Yeah, you should cut that.
That could be
out
for the live show.
All
right.
All right. Don't forget to end part 1 so we can go to part 2.
Okay. Ha ha ha. Good joke. Okay. So also people called me out that I forgot to do but you told me you don't like it, the NPR voice. Maybe I need a new thing. Maybe I need a new gimmick for the start of part 2. How would you start part 2?
I don't know if I told you I didn't like it. I thought you came to that conclusion.
What about you yell yes? What if we flip it and you start the part 2 episodes? That'd be fun.
I think you're
all right.
Maybe next time. I don't think I have it in me tonight.
I mean, you need some advance notice for something like that. Veggies versus Milkman. Oh, yeah, I was thinking I think that's the same person. But anyways, whatever. Vaymelka screwed me. I'm gonna lose my matchup probably because I don't know why he didn't play today.
That's why he's not on the show tonight.
Yeah, why doesn't he get more starts? He should have gotten 3 out of the 4 starts this week. If you're a starting goalie, it shouldn't be 2 of 4. It should be Elon, 3 of 4.
Guess who just scored?
Is it Scheifele?
Scheifele.
Frickin' finally, man. Wait, are you sure?
Let's start the next. Let's start with that.
It's not showing up in the
Scott Billick and Mark Lazarus have credited the goal in the last 20 seconds to Scheifele.
Just showed up.
There it is.
All right, how's this looking? Ooh, from Blake Brian, I traded away Wheeler as like a dump, and now he's had 2 great. This happens to me all the time.
Wheeler's kind of a dump.
Why am I? Well, now all of a sudden he's great.
Yeah,
I hate fantasy. Why do I play this game? So frustrating. All right, here we go. Yes, welcome everybody to the second half of today, Sunday, November 27th episode of Keeping Karlsson, hosted by myself, Elon Dubrovsky, and my very good friend and fantasy hockey connoisseur, Brian Kalm, where we're going to continue to go over all of the players who did really well on Friday and Saturday, and then a bunch of other guys, including one guy who's doing really well right now. I take it all back, everything I said about Mark Scheifele, because he just scored a goal from his new line, which Brian said rudely that it's decisively the second line. No, it's the top line because that's Mark Scheifele, assisted by Wheeler and Cole Perfetti. So congratulations, 5-2 now for the Jets. So a nice mid-game update here.
You fully agreed with me and had offered no pushback on the last part, like part 1, which was literally 10 minutes ago.
I'm going to edit that. People won't ever hear that.
Okay. All right.
Wait, let me record it right now. Okay. Brian, I disagree. I think that line is actually the clear first line. I don't know what you're talking about. Okay. So we'll cut that in later. By the way, looking at this box score of Winnipeg and Chicago, how is it that Caleb Jones could only get points when he's not like taking over for his brother on the top power play? Like everyone got excited. Well, I mean, that's kind of rude to say, but when Seth Jones got injured, it looked like a great opportunity for Caleb Jones, and then he turned into a whole dud. And now he's a power play assist from, I guess, the second power play today, and he also had an assist in the last game. Maybe it's just good for him to not have as much responsibility. Maybe it was like too much pressure for the young lad. So I don't know. Maybe now's the time to go back and look at Caleb Jones, or not. But interesting to see him get another point.
Yeah, I don't think I'm revisiting Caleb Jones, but good for him getting another point. Do you know he and Seth took penalties 9 seconds apart earlier tonight? So they got some quality time in the penalty box.
I wonder if they're friends. I get there's probably ways to find out. There's probably like if we were like Chicago Blackhawks fans, we'd probably see interviews of them and like. But if they weren't friends, they'd probably have to pretend to be, right? Because it would be so awkward otherwise. But like some brothers aren't great friends. Have you ever watched Succession? A lot of strife between those brothers.
Yeah,
Anyway.
I haven't.
You haven't, of course. Okay. All right. So let's get back to some hockey talk here. Well, we were talking about hockey. We were talking about Seth and Caleb Jones. But okay. What are we doing here? We're going through all of the players who did well over the past couple of days. I got a list. It's already out of date, but this was like the list of top scores from Friday and Saturday. Next on the list, Brian, get this. Ryan Poehling. Do the listeners know what team Ryan Poehling is on? I remember him as a guy who scored a goal in like his only game of the season for the Habs one year. And then the next year,
end of the season and like a debut.
And then I was like, or maybe it was more than a goal. Maybe it was like a hat trick. I don't know what it was. Like he had a really good game.
He had a big game.
And then like the next year whenever I would be sorting the players by fantasy points per game, he was like at the top of the list because of his goal from
hat trick, 3 goals on 3 shots back in 2018-19 as a 20-year-old with the Montreal Canadiens. But he's not there anymore.
Yeah, well, no, now he's on the Pittsburgh Penguins. He's on the 4th line. And he scored 2 versus Philly on Friday. So good for him. No points on Saturday. I'm assuming we're not going to dive too deep into Ryan Poehling. He's playing on a line with Bluger and Archibald, who also have gotten some points lately. But I think for Pittsburgh's sake, they probably want to get their offense from other lines and save line 4 to be more of an energy line or whatever they do. I can't imagine we're expecting that 4th line to continue rolling like they were last week.
No.
Okay.
No, this is like similar to like Arthur Kaliev, like doing really great on the 4th line, except maybe a little less because like these guys don't even really have like a pedigree or upside.
Yeah, I'm actually into Kaliev
or upward mobility through the depth chart. So
yeah,
it's nice of you to shut them out when we could.
Okay, there you go. That's what the benefit is of doing a show like this, where I just I'm forced to discuss every player in this list that was generated by the stats. We get to throw out some new names, though some old names are Brian Rust, a name that we seem to mention every week. But there were a couple of games where Jeff Petrie jumped up to the top power play, bumping Brian Rust. When like the last time we talked about him, it was like, well, yeah, he stinks lately, but at least he's on the top power play, so he's not going to go pointless forever. Then like a game later, he was like off the top power play. Looks like he was back on the top power play. So there you go. For your people who still have Brian Rust, there's a glimmer of hope in that game versus Toronto. Not that it helped much. Like Pittsburgh got defeated by Toronto, so maybe they'll decide to change things. Rust is pointless in 4 games. He only has 10 points in 22 games on the season. I feel like maybe a lot of people are thinking, I wish I traded him a while ago, because now probably his value is in the toilet and you have to make that tough choice of whether to just drop him outright, which would sting because you spent a lot of draft capital on him. But I think the trade value is all gone, unless maybe Brian will, I don't know. I guess we can't just like dive into Brian Rust every episode, but I feel like I just need to keep bringing him up until you say forget about him, right? As you continue to say you still see reason for hope, then I should probably just get an update from you, because I'm sure all the people who have Brian Rust are like, well, okay, I'm going to hold on Brian, so there's reason for hope. So now another week of no points.
I feel terrible.
Still reason for hope.
I feel terrible when Brian Rust was moved. We said, so basically the line from the last time we talked about him was, still looks okay, still has his deployment. If he falls off the top power play, I'd be worried, but that hasn't happened yet. And then it happened. So I am sorry to anybody who is on the fence. It's like, you know what, I'll be a little more patient. Although hopefully, like we didn't know he was about to get booted from the top power play. Of course, if we did, we would have said get rid of him. But things definitely went from bad to worse for anyone with Brian Rust. I don't think it's a death knell for his value. But yeah, if you weren't sweating before about Brian Rust, you really are now. Elon, what would you do if you have Brian Rust?
I mean, the way things are going for me this year, I would probably drop him, and then he would be amazing.
You would drop him? You would drop Brian Rust?
Well, I don't know.
Would you trade him for Blake Wheeler?
Yeah, I was telling Brian, I think off the air, that I traded away Blake Wheeler as like a throw in. Like it was like basically the trade was I traded Line for Jeff Skinner because I need help now because my team stinks, and then like I needed to give an extra player. And anyway, it was with Jordan, and he was like, just give me any forward. And I looked at my roster. I was like, oh, well, whatever. Like Wheeler's doing nothing. And I picked him up as a free agent just recently anyway. So I'll just throw in Wheeler. And now he's had like 2 points in each of his last couple games. So just frustrating.
After 3 points in 8 games. So but maybe this is exactly what will happen with Brian Rust, except Rust's upside is better. He's going to need to get back on that top power play though. So I don't know if you really answered, like, what would you,
look, I see like a Pajot in free agency who is on the top power play and has been producing lately. I feel like my brain tells me stop looking at the name of the player and just look at his production and look at his deployment. And like I look at it and say like I think Pajot looks better. So I would probably consider like dropping like a Rust for like a Pajot, and then it would turn out to be a big mistake probably because, a couple months from now, it'd be like Pajot's back in free agency.
I was thinking about you though. Like I was thinking about how quick you are to cut ties with players, like quicker than me. And I think there's two parts to this strategy, right? Like you can afford to cut ties on players early or a little ahead of the curve, which sometimes will burn you and sometimes it will reward you. But you can do it if you're really quick and strong at getting that next thing onto your roster and making use of that roster spot. Like it's a two-part strategy. Like I have tried it, Elon. I've tried to be less patient with players to sort of emulate your move a little. And but I have found that I'm actually not quick enough or accurate enough to get the replacement as well.
Yeah,
so
there's a lot of luck to it, right? Like I feel like sometimes it works so well. Last year, like every move I made worked out perfectly, and I won tier 1 at the cupful, and like
that's what needs to happen.
Yeah, like last year, I grabbed like whatever Brat and like all these guys who turned out to be amazing. This year, like I grabbed Tatar. I dropped like a pretty good player to get Tatar, and Tatar now totally disappeared. Who's Thomas? I dropped Kuzmenko to get someone, and he's a superstar. As like some seasons it works, some season but whatever. I have a lot of excuses for this season because whatever. Werenski's injured for the year and I had a baby, so I'm just going to say that it's not my fault.
You've got your excuses. The most important thing in fantasy hockey is first your roster and second your excuses. If it doesn't go well, you got to have injuries, you got to have life circumstances that you can trot out as needed. I will mention, by the way, to anybody who's like really fretting over Brian Rust, he did.
We're talking about Brian Rust.
He played 78 seconds. Like he played on the majority of the time that the top unit was on.
No, I told you, Brian, in the last game, he got back on. That's what I'm saying. But also they lost that game, and I wouldn't be surprised if now maybe they try, because Petrie's pretty good. Maybe just put Petrie back there. I don't know what's going to happen. But like Rust has like two. The thing with Rust also is he's taking some shots, right? Like he had 2 shots versus Toronto, 2 shots versus Philly. Like imagine one of those shots went in the net. We wouldn't even be having this conversation.
Yeah,
like, okay, I guess Brian Rust is back. So maybe that's a reason to hold. But it's very concerning. I'd like him better if he was playing with Crosby, who's amazing. Actually, I have Crosby on this list at some point.
Let's talk about Crosby for a sec.
Having a monster season up to 29 points in 22 games. I took a look. So that puts him at 108 point pace. If he ends up with 108 points, that would be his highest pace. Okay. Just pace since 2012, 2013, where he had a higher point pace, but it was only in 36 games. There was like a couple years in a row where Crosby didn't play that much and he was pacing for well above 108 points. But you have to go back like over a decade to an actual season where he played like a significant number of games and then paced for what he's doing now. So very impressive, right? I guess some of it could go to like that was more of a dead puck era and now is more of a high scoring era. So I'm not saying that like today's Sidney Crosby is better than like 10 years ago Sidney Crosby, but still very impressive, right? To see like a 35 plus player just still being so elite in the league. I love it. Great stuff, Sid the Kid.
Yeah, Sid is he always going to be Sid the Kid? I feel like it's awkward to call him the Kid at this point.
He's still younger than me, so I could always call him the Kid.
Yeah. And he looks great too. Like there's some unsustainability for Crosby. Like he's converting at twice his usual shooting percentage at 5-on-5. So he has 10 goals on 41 5-on-5 shots instead of like 5 or 6. But at the same time, he's freaking Sidney Crosby. And this is a guy that we give the benefit of the doubt whenever he shows that he's exceeding expectations. He's also like under the hood, looks so good. He's putting up, Elon, you mentioned that last season. What was it, like a decade ago, where he had like the best point total that he's had since pacing for what he's at right now? That was a mangled sentence. But what I'm trying to say is Crosby has his highest individual expected goals rates at 5-on-5 in a decade. Like he is found another gear, obviously, because he's Sidney Crosby. And by the way, he's also had some unfortunate numbers on the power play, which is one reason that Rust was shuttled off. That Penguins power play has not been so successful this year. Something's a little broken. I think it'll be fixed. And I think all of this washes out to Crosby being, still being that 100-point dominant player. This guy, he just keeps doing it year after year. I remember, Elon, do you remember in the early days of the podcast, when the questions we got was like, at what point do you think Sidney Crosby will stop being elite? This was like in like 2013.
Yeah, it was like, in keeper leagues, when do you start drafting other people ahead of
Yeah.
Crosby?
And we said, like, maybe around, I think our answer was 32, 33. Well, he is 35 years old. And like you said, Elon, on his highest point pace and his highest expected goals rates of the decade. Never counts it out. Wow.
He is very good. But okay, back to next on the list. So I think I started this conversation talking about Ryan Poehling. So we're back at 14, 15 on the list. Braden Point. Let's go to Tampa Bay. Just one game for the Friday. Most of these people played 2 games over Friday and Saturday, but Point just needed 1 game to get to the top of this list. What a game, right? 2 goals and 1 assist versus St. Louis in the 5-2 win on Friday. That brought him to over point per game on the season, 21 points in 20 games. Point has only been around a 70-ish point guy these past couple of years. So Brian, he's taking this step up after he brought his value down to help. This is like a kind of a gift Braden Point gave to people who drafted him this year, because he had those down years, making people feel like he's not worth drafting so high. Then whoever got him gets a guy playing with Kucherov, having an amazing season. I'm curious to know, do you think that this Braden Point that we're seeing this year is the real deal, or do you think he's going to fall back to the 70-ish point guy? To me, I'll just throw it out there. I think the fact that he's playing with a healthy Kucherov is like a big part of the difference. And so as long as Kucherov is healthy, it's hard to imagine Point not keeping up at least point per game.
I think that definitely helps Braden Point. Like, he's been getting more secondary assists than usual at 5-on-5, which you could say might be luck, or it might not be noise. Like, maybe he deserves a bunch of them, and maybe that has to do with playing with Kucherov, because you might be 2 passes away from assisting on a goal at any given moment with a healthy Kucherov. His points participation is also a little high, but last year Braden Point's points participation was way too low. Like, he was avoiding, or at least it looks like he was avoiding being involved in goal scoring opportunities. Like, you guys take all the points. I don't want any. He wasn't actually doing that. But anyway, the range that we've seen from him now is 70 to 80 points. That's the number that we can reliably. It's not a huge range, right? And variance is going to push Point towards one end of that range or the other. And I'd put him at the higher end of that. So I like what I'm seeing from Point this year. I'm a believer that he is a point per game player under regular circumstances, which it feels like is what we're seeing this year.
Okay. And I guess it's that time of the year again. Like, I feel like every year where we bring up Alex Killorn and I'm like, man, why didn't I grab him out of free agency when I had the chance? Why didn't I draft this guy? He's like, I don't know, like, he always ends up going on a run like this. And now he has a goal and an assist in his last game versus St. Louis. That brought him to 9 points in his last 6 games. He's now got 17 points in 20 games on the season. I'm talking about Alex Killorn here. He's playing on, I guess, the second line, or, whatever, the line 1B with Stamkos and Nick Paul at even strength, and Killorn is on the top power play. He's only 25% rostered on Yahoo. I mean, I feel like a guy who's on a line and power play with Stamkos, who's 17 points in 20 games, should be rostered in higher than 25% of leagues. I just saw him taken, Brian, in our joint league, the Bubupful, and I thought to myself, wait, Killorn was in free agency? I wish I should have grabbed him. Oh, why do I have whoever I have? I grabbed TJ Oshie and I was feeling really smart about it, but I think I'd rather have Killorn. I don't know. Maybe is that a weird player to ask you to compare to? Anyways, what do you think? I know you're always down. Every year I ask you about Killorn, and you always say he's no big deal and he'll cool off. And
I don't always say that.
You don't say that? Okay.
Like, my tune has changed a little. That was the early Killorn, and then it sort of shifted to like, yeah, this guy can be rosterable for stretches of time, especially depending on his power play role. Power play 1 is a new development for Killorn this year. He was there for the first few games of the season, then got kicked off. So let's see if Killorn can hold on there. He's bumped Brandon Hagel. So it's kind of like the Dawson Mercer, Nathan Bastian situation in New Jersey, where it feels like Mercer has an easier route to staying on top power play than Killorn, but Hagel isn't an insurmountable bar to clear for Killorn to actually get onto that top unit. But at the same time, even if Killorn does stay on the top unit, I'd keep in mind that in the past, Killorn from there has been like a 50 to 60 point guy, which is good. But that feels like that's the best case scenario. Although I don't know why I started that with like a negative frame. That's good. That's good for someone you grabbed out of free agency. But at the same time, Elon, I don't think you were so foolish for not jumping on Killorn. He's playing over his head right now at 5-on-5, high secondary assist rate for 1, but he's also scored 6 times on 19 shots at 5-on-5. That's a 32% shooting success rate. And most recently, like while you've passed on adding Alex Killorn. He's notched 6 goals on 22 shots total in his last 12 games. So it's not even 2 shots per game, but he's averaging a goal every other game. So like, this is not, it feels bad, but I don't think you should, like, you were right to not rush to grab him. I think he's always worth a look. Like, you should always be interested when he appears in free agency, but I don't think you would have imagined him putting up the run that he's put up now, especially because his shot rates have dropped a notable amount too. His expected goals rates have fallen as well. Killorn should definitely be more than 25% rostered just by virtue of being on the top power play. And it's a bummer to miss out on the run if you did, but take some consolation that I think you could have reasonably seen Killorn going on this kind of tear and getting power play 1 deployment. While he's on it though, and while he's there, I'd say he's rosterable in most situations. Like, I'd want him on my Cupful team.
Yeah, I was talking about someone else who was 25% rostered. Oh yeah, Kevin Hayes. So they're both around the same percent rostered right
I would
now.
take Hayes for sure, though.
You take Hayes for sure.
Yeah.
Even with the position eligibility. I don't know. I guess it probably Hayes, but I don't know. Killorn, I like the spot he's in right now. And I feel like a bigger chance for a big game just because you're playing with Steven Stamkos. And I guess we should mention Nick Paul, right? He's like also there on this line. He's not on the top power play, but he is definitely not nothing. Like, Nick Paul has been producing a lot lately. And he's also someone that I would take a look at. I would take Killorn first, but if he's taken and you want to get in on some of this Tampa Bay offense, Nick Paul's up to now 15 points in 20 games. He's had 2 straight multi-point games. So yeah, I like him. I like him too. Tampa's a good team.
They're a good team.
Yeah.
They could be, we didn't name them as one of the Eastern Cup contenders, but they're in there for sure.
They're always there. Plus, who knows what they'll do at the trade deadline. Okay, so next up here in this list, we have, so I brought up Braden Point. Next is Dawson Mercer, who we already discussed, had a great couple of games, top line, top power play. I think he's very close to like pause the pod, but I guess not pause the pod. He's not pause the pod, but he's someone that you should be very highly considering while he's playing with Jack Hughes. Next is Zach Parise, Brock Nelson. We talked about them. Next, Jacob Chychrun. Okay, Tulip Queen. Like I said, I posted in the Keeping Karlsson Discord, the patron-only Discord. That's a perk we give to the patrons, but really, it's a perk they give to us. The privilege of hanging out with all of our great patrons in the Discord. Yeah, Tulip Queen just wrote, Chychrun, please. I want to know thoughts about his value after a trade, and if you think he's more valuable just staying put, or if you think the Yotes can keep up the good play. So yeah, it's a very good question, actually. So Brian, Jacob Chychrun, back from injury, has been so great. No points today, but another, 4 shots or something in this loss to Minnesota, which they probably would have won if they put Vejmelka in instead of Connor Ingram. I'm a little salty about that. I really could have used that Vejmelka start in my Cupful matchup. But yeah, I could have also used a point from Jacob Chychrun, but he didn't get a point. He had 4 shots, a block, whatever. So he did his part aside from putting something behind who played for Minnesota. Oh, Marc-Andre Fleury's back. Cool. All right. But yeah, Tulip Queen's question is good because like Chychrun has gotten on the top power play with Arizona, which is good. Last year, remember, he couldn't get that spot. Like it was, Gostisbehere there and he wouldn't share, but now they're sharing the defensive spots on the top power play. They were both there then along with Schmaltz and Keller and who's the other one? I don't even remember at this point. Someone else is over on that top power play in Arizona.
Is it Travis Boyd?
Sometimes. Actually, yeah, it is not.
Lawson Krause, Matthias Oh, wait. No.
I don't know. It looks like
Schmaltz, Boyd, Keller, Gostisbehere, Chychrun.
Okay, there you go.
Yeah.
And I think at one point it was that high pedigree guy. I'm trying to remember his name.
Barrett Hayton?
No, not him. Like a more recent
Dylan
one.
Guenther.
Yeah, Guenther. I think he was there at one point. Anyway, whatever. We're talking about Jacob Chychrun. Do you think at this point, if you have Chychrun in fantasy, are you like, can't wait, so excited for him to get traded? Or are you kind of like, I feel like really good with how he's doing right now. Like I'm happy for him to just stay with Arizona as long as possible.
I don't really have much of a feeling on Chychrun being traded. Like I want him to be in a top power play role where he's getting lots of minutes, and that's what's happening right now, right? Chychrun is getting showcased. The team, like the Coyotes, are motivated to give him lots of minutes and opportunity so that he can crush it and attract a big return for suitors. And Chychrun is also motivated to do well because the better he plays, the more likely it is that someone's going to pay the price that Arizona is requiring for him to get moved which seems to be the end goal for Chychrun and the Coyotes. So it's nice to see him back with a vengeance. 18 shots in 3 games is awesome from Chychrun. Great to see him land back on the top power play unit, even though, like, you know, we're like, oh, well, Shane Gostisbehere is quarterbacking it. That's not going to change. But they did what a couple other teams have done this year. It's funny how this used. Do you remember how normal it was, Elon, to have 3 forwards, 2 defensemen, no questions? There were 2 defensemen on the top power play. And now that whenever we see a second defense on the top, oh, this is novel. What an interesting idea, Jeff Petrie on the top unit, along with Chris Letang. So what a change. And like, this is while we've been doing the show too.
Well, like, did we have the like when you were playing NHL 93? Like, did you even have the option of putting 4 forwards?
I don't
on
think
the top
so.
power play?
I don't think that was possible.
That's funny. All right. So since we're on our zone, I do want to ask you about Janice Jerome Moser, JJ Moser, who keeps getting points. Like, I thought, okay, now that Chychrun's back, he's going to get bumped from the top power play. He's probably going to slow down. But like, no, he scored today against Minnesota. He also scored in the last game versus Detroit. He's had assists in each of the 3 games before that. Moser don't need no power play to produce. He's now up to 13 points in 20 games on the season, which is a 53-point pace. Again, for JJ Moser, a 60th overall pick a couple drafts to go. So what do you think? Is he like, are we at a point where we just have to accept that this guy's good and he's probably worth rostering in a lot of leagues, or are you still not a believer?
I don't know. It's almost like JJ Moser's Connor Clifton parallel, where, you know, you're producing and we don't fully understand why. Moser's seen some nice shooting from the Coyotes while he's on the ice, which I don't expect to last. Moser also had a few top unit power play points. He had a few power play assists from there. He's no longer there, so those won't be available to him anymore. You know, the numbers for Moser don't really suggest like that he fits the profile of an actually good offensive producer. So you could ride him and then eventually drop him, I assume. But no need to get ahead of yourself. Let it play out. But I'll stay open-minded, Elon. But from what I'm seeing, it doesn't match the sort of player type that does end up being someone that we really value.
Yeah. And also the peripherals are very confusing because he, like 3 games ago, he had 7 blocks versus Carolina. And then the next 2 games, no blocks and no hits. But he scored a goal in each of those games. It's like he gives you one I'll give you one. You're not getting a goal and like peripherals from me. So fair enough, JJ. Just give me something. Okay, next in the list here, we got Ryan O'Reilly, who I guess we already kind of talked about over in St. Louis. Then we have Adam Lowry, who, you know, I was like lamenting how Scheifele wasn't getting points in Winnipeg. It's because all these points have been going to like the third line. Adam Lowry, who I think also got a point today. Right. I think I was complaining about how he was one of the, he has an assist today. Today's Sunday, but yeah, he had a big 1-goal, 1-assist game versus Dallas in the 5-4 win on Friday. Before that, though, he was pointless in forever. He's a third line center, second power play. I assume that we're just going to conclude that this is like a, you know, same as usual for Adam Lowry. We're not seeing any reason to bump him up any of our lists.
No.
Okay. Yeah. You know, bringing these guys up. Here's another one that you're going to say no right away. Jarrett Anderson Dolan on LA, goal, assist, 6 shots in the win over San Jose on Friday. So a huge game for JAD over. He's on LA, by the way. I don't know if I mentioned that. Seems like it's probably another Adam Lowry situation. Who's points in a million games before this good game. He's on the 4th line with our friend Arthur Kaliev, who has been able to produce from that line a little bit. But yeah, I'll once again give you the opportunity to give a 1-word answer when asking if anyone should be interested in Jarrett Anderson Dolan.
Sorry, I lost the mute button on my whole keyboard thing. No, I am going to make it a pretty quick no for the reasons that you mostly just illustrated. We're good. We're good for Jarrett Anderson Dolan.
Okay, but he does give us a springboard to talk about some more interesting players over on the LA Kings, because it seems pretty official now. They're back to having Kevin Fiala on the top line, and he's been on fire. He's amazing. 4 points in his last 2 games. Nice to see Adrian Kempe pick up assists in each of his last couple of games, because he was being super quiet before. So it's probably good news for him, right? To have Fiala back as his line mate. Still, though, Kempe is only pacing for 46 points on the season. He had that amazing 57 points last year with a ton of goals, but he's taking fewer shots this year. Is it possible that maybe last season was maybe just a bit of a blip? You know, it was a contract year. I don't know. Like maybe is like around 50-ish point Kempe probably what we should be expecting, or do you think there's reason to still expect him to get back to the heights of 2021-22?
It's an interesting case because coming out of last season, we were looking at Kempe having emerged 35 goals, and the general vibe was like, yeah, I think he can keep most of that up. And at 5-on-5 so far, Adrian Kempe has kept up his goal scoring and points at the same rate. He's scoring at the same rate at 5-on-5 as he was last year, when he might have had a bit of a high shooting percentage, but looked mostly legit. And this season, the only difference we're seeing is that he's off last year's power play point pace by like 5 power play points. That's the difference between Adrian Kempe being a 57-point player last season and a 52-point player this season. Because if you take away those 5 power play points that we would have expected, that's where he lands. So there's not a lot of fat to trim from Adrian Kempe's game. And I was looking, okay, is he being denied opportunities elsewhere? Well, I found this really weird Adrian Kempe. Like, this is my fact of the episode. If we had a stinger to play for this moment, a fact of the episode brought to you. We have no sponsor for it, but this would be it. In 6 years of being a full-time NHLer, including this season so far, Adrian Kempe has only had an on-ice shooting percentage above 7% one time. And that was his sophomore season. So like the season farthest back from now. This is when like an average forward, probably in the top 6, where Kempe wasn't always, but still an average forward, even in the top 9, should have like at least an 8-ish% on ice shooting percentage. If all is reasonable, sometimes 9%. If you're on a really good line, it can be above 10%. But Adrian Kempe's on ice shooting percentages since his sophomore season, 6%, 4%, 7%, 6.5%, 7%. I've never seen this before. Usually if I see this number under a guy's on ice shooting percentage, I'm like, oh, regression's coming. Like the team isn't scoring on enough of their shots when he's on the ice. That's going to correct itself. But I don't know if I can say that about Adrian Kempe. He has this record of being on the ice and the team not being able to score while he's there. And I can't believe I've never noticed this before. And I also guess I shouldn't expect it to regress at this point. When we've seen this happening for 5 consecutive years, maybe it's time to just be like, yeah, this is how it is for Adrian Kempe. And like I mentioned, his deployment has changed over the years for sure. But like, I don't know what to do with this. I'm not sure if we can regress that low on ice shooting percentage for Kempe that we would for anyone else. Anyway, the question for me about Kempe is whether he can reclaim those lost power play points. Again, just 5, but it eats a big part of his fantasy relevance. And my answer to that question is I'm not sure that Kempe can reclaim those lost power play points. That top unit has changed shape since last season, of course, with the addition of Fiala and Velarde. It looks from his shot locations that Kempe's maybe roaming a little less, which seemed to work well for him last season. And Kempe is definitely shooting less with the man advantage on that top unit. So even though Kempe looked legit enough last year, there just isn't a whole lot of cushion for him to drop off. I think Kempe is probably one of the leaner 35 goal scorers in the league. And we're seeing the effects of that. Unfortunately, he's not looking like he's going to build off of last season. And even if he loses just a few points, it reminds me, Elon, a little bit of Anders Lee all those years back now when he was, a really solid goal scorer. But we were constantly asked, should we drop the guy? It feels like Kempe is stepping into that kind of mold.
Yeah, I mean, the deployment seems good, but at the end of the day, you want to get that production. But like I said, he has assists in each of his last couple games, so we'll see if that's something to build on. But yeah, we'll see if he can start putting some pucks in the net like he did last year. Once again, and then I guess still on LA, and you mentioned him, Velarde, who's still on that top power play, but since Fiala's back on line 1, that puts Velarde back on line 3, which makes this line 3. Remember when we were actually interested in the likes of Carl Grundstrom and can I remember what it was? Grundstrom and Lizotte. I think that was the third line. And it was like, those guys were kind of interesting because they're playing with Fiala. Now they're back with Velarde, which to me is less interesting. No disrespect to Gabe Velarde. But yeah, he's still in the top power play. He actually scored a power play goal versus the Rangers earlier in the week, but that's his only point in his last 8 games. So I think it's time to say snoozer alert, right? Like if people held on to Velarde, you've held on too long. And I don't think I'd be interested in it. Like I feel like Velarde is the same as Peugeot. Probably to me, he's like not on a great line at even strength. He's on the top power play, so there's always the chance that he'll get a point from there, but not enough of a chance to make him worth rostering in all but the deepest of leagues, as far as I'm concerned.
I wholeheartedly agree. Even as a just being on that top power play unit, I didn't think that would be enough. But now that he's not there,
no, he is. Man, you weren't listening. He is still on the top power play.
I meant on the top line. Sorry. Okay, I'll say that. I'll just start my answer over. I guess I'm not sure I have a whole lot to add since we last talked about him. His spot was like he was in a tenuous position, even top line, top power play. He wasn't necessarily a fully rosterable player. And now that he's lost half of that deployment, like the top line part, then I'm definitely not terribly interested in him. I think you can let go. It's been long enough since he's been rewarding you for rostering him.
Yeah. All right. Well, thanks for the goals, Velarde, but you can go. You could go follow like Shane Pinto, an early season exciting goal scorer that has since disappeared, even though he seems to have decent enough deployment. All right, Brian. So we've still got a little bit more to go. Some exciting teams. We're going to go to Boston. We're going to go to Minnesota. We're going to go to Vancouver. All of that's still to come in part 4, I guess, if you want to consider each half episode apart. But it's, I guess, part 2 of part 2 coming up in just a sec. What am I even doing? Let's just get to the ad break and finish this off. So you're listening to Keeping Karlsson. Brian, this is the ad break, by the way, in case you're recalling.
Sorry, the what?
Okay. And we're back. Welcome, everyone, as we continue our walk through the players who have done really well over the past few days, and then some of their compadres who are not doing as well. Like, for example, we talked about Jared Anderson-Dolan, then right away switched over to Kempe and Velarde, who've been letting us down. We're going to do the same thing over in Boston, okay? Where first we're going to talk about someone doing very well. That's David Krejci, who had 2 goals versus Carolina recently. That brought him to 8 points in his last 5 games and 17 points in 18 games on the season. Holy cow. What an amazing welcome back to the NHL for David Krejci. He's been playing with Pastrnak and Zacha lately on, I guess you call it the second line. It kind of feels rude almost to call a line with David Pastrnak the second line. I'll call it like 1B or 1A plus. I don't know. I'm seeing that Krejci has a high shooting percentage. So Brian, does that tell you that this won't last? Or does the fact that you're like the world's biggest Krejci super fan mean that you're going to somewhat find a reason to disregard the high shooting percentage and just say that this is going to ride and Krejci's awesome and he'll figure out a way to keep getting a point per game from this great deployment?
No, I'm not going to say that. Even though you know my affinity for David Krejci clearly, I'm still a realist. And I see that David Krejci has taken 15 shots at 5-on-5. Elon, do you know how many goals he's scored offhand on those 15 shots?
15.
No, not quite. That would be
10.
amazing. No, still no.
5.
Lower.
5.
6.
Wow.
Yeah. Okay. All right. That's a 40% shooting percentage, though. That's like 4 or 5 more than Krejci's usual shooting percentage would bring. Like 4 or 5 more goals out of those 6. So take those away. And Krejci's at like a 55 point pace. He's feasting with the man advantage, which is nice to see. Him getting consistent power play 1 time, including 8 power play points in 18 games for David Krejci. I think that may actually be something that he could keep up. But even with that, you know, that 55 point pace from above still technically stands. So I'd look at him as a low shooting 55-ish point guy. The X factor here is power play production. If he can keep that up, then, you know, maybe he's a low shooting 60 point guy, but if he can't, then he falls on the lower side of 55 points, like below. That's the lower side of 55 points. So yes, I love David Krejci. I'm excited for the season he's having, but this is not sustainable. 40%.
Sure. But did you say like he's going to end up with like 55 points? I'll take the over on that.
Like 50 rest of the season, 55 point pace.
Nah, I say higher. Maybe like 65, 70. He's playing with Pastrnak. He's great.
You know what I love? I like that. How can I call the second line a line when David Pasternak's on it? You're not even mentioning that Taylor Hall, former MVP, also on the line.
He's not. That's the thing. Taylor Hall stinks. He's not even on that line. It's been, like I said, Pavel Zacha playing with the two of them, Brian. You got to get up to speed here. Taylor Hall has been on the third line with Charlie Coyle and former Ottawa Senators legend Nick Foligno lately. He's also on the second power play. I was actually about to ask you about Taylor Hall, so I'm glad you brought him up.
It's almost like I knew.
There you go. Well, you knew some things, but yeah, are we snoozer alert for Taylor Hall right now, similar to Gabe Velarde? Because I'm seeing pretty similar. Actually, I'm seeing Velarde has better deployment. He's got the top power play at least.
Yeah, forgive me for the slightly inaccurate segue, but for Taylor Hall on the third line, yeah, that's a big yuck. His last point came from the third line too, with not Nick Foligno, it was Charlie Coyle and Trent Frederick, of course, who we knew Taylor Hall would like have to play with at some point to get him going. Elon, I feel like there's a story to be written here about what's happened to Taylor Hall. There has to be one. MVP and like a no doubt superstar to a middle 6 player and not a great deal of time either. It's like Boston got him seemingly on a discount. We're like, oh, of course, Bergeron, Marchand getting older, and Boston just adds Taylor Hall, no problem. And now it's like, I wonder if Boston would get out of that contract if they could. They clearly are not enjoying the Taylor Hall experience, and I would like to understand it better than I do right now. It's mystifying to me. But in the meantime, yeah, like if he was dropped in the cupful, I'm not rushing to add him. And as I mentioned, I dropped him in another league myself that's like fairly shallow, but still I would have definitely held on to him if I had some belief in him, but I just don't. Brutal.
Yeah. I mean, maybe he'll get back on a good line, then you could get interested in him again. But I'd rather just wait for that to happen while he's in free agency rather than expect something to happen while he's still on line 3 and power play 2. So just watch game day lines. Yeah. But I guess the one thing I'll maybe question that you said is like, you're saying Boston's not enjoying the Taylor Hall experience. I mean, it's hard to know, right? I mean, he's a pretty solid guy to have on your third line, and they are 18-3 on the season. So maybe they, it's working for them. But yeah, maybe you're saying that they could just spend less money and get the same production. I guess it would be fun to ask Ludo Shinzawa if like Boston is disappointed in Taylor Hall, or if they're like super happy with what they're getting from him, even though like fantasy managers are not. But yeah, I guess the last news item here on Boston is that Linus Ullmark suffered an upper body injury on Friday. Seems like the vibe on Twitter I'm getting is that he's just like day to day, not like too serious. Maybe he'll miss a game or two. So might not be a big deal though. You never know, right? Like it could always get aggravated. He could be out a little bit of time. And like I said, Boston is 18-3. That like, have I accentuated that enough? Like New Jersey's 18-4, Boston is 18-3. Like I feel like Boston hasn't gotten as much fanfare as New Jersey just because kind of we expected. We've seen it before. But like they're like right now the top team in the league as far as I'm concerned, looking at the win percentage. And so you probably want their starting goalie. And Swayman has been not great. It's like below 900 save percentage on the season, but this might be a great opportunity for him to get a couple games, get some rhythm going. And I wouldn't be surprised if he'll get that save percentage above 900 with a couple of games. So I'd be interested in him for as long as Ullmark is out. But again, like don't just drop everyone, to rush to get him because it might only be for a couple games.
Exactly. Yeah, I want the starter on the Bruins, and the starter on the Bruins, right? Like for as long as Ullmark is out, just Jeremy Swayman, and he's not no one, right? Like if it was like, oh, Yaro Halak is stepping in as the starter, I might feel that's a little dicier. But I, like you, Elon, I don't think it's a wild thing to say. We're not putting ourselves out on the limb here by saying we think Swayman can get his save percentage up above 900. So yeah, go grab him if he's available for some Boston starts until Ullmark is back.
Okay, next let's go to Minnesota, where Kirill Kaprizov is amazing. He had a goal and assist and 9 shots in the 4-3 loss to Toronto on Friday. That brings him to 11 points in his last 8 games. Kaprizov is pacing for 98 on the season. So he's very good. Okay. I don't think we have much to discuss with him. If I recall correctly, though, we did bring up concerns with Matt Boldy in the last episode. He was in a bit of a cold streak and he responded big time. Goals in 2 straight and also 2 assists versus Winnipeg as well. So he's got like, what is it now? 4 points in his last 2 games. Boldy's been on the top power play with Gaudreau and Greenway at even strength, which isn't a very exciting even strength line, but obviously you love having a guy on the top power play with Kaprizov, and he's actually produced. It's not like an Addison situation where he's on the top power play, not producing, at least recently, he scored that goal. So Brian, what do you think about Boldy? Like, let's say we were to compare him to Taylor Hall for the rest of the season. Like, as we were concerned about Boldy, he's actually doing something. Hall did have 7 shots in his last game, for what it's worth, to say something nice about Taylor Hall. But yeah, let's wrap a bow on our Matt Boldy discussion after we saw him struggling, and now it seems to have broken out of it a little bit.
First, I just want to comment on Kaprizov pacing for 98 goals on the season when Minnesota could not score. Sorry. 90. Okay. Before I get to Boldy, just like one quick shout out to Kirill Kaprizov for not letting his fantasy managers panic too much. Like Minnesota was not scoring, but Kaprizov is still pacing for 98 points on the season. So good for him. Way to get yours, Kirill. That's really helpful. As for Matt Boldy, I mean, one of those scoring draughts was where Minnesota had 12 goals. One of those scoring draughts was where Minnesota had 12 goals over 7 games. Now, over the last 3 games since that drought, they have 11 goals. So up to over 3 goals per game after being under 2 goals per game for a pretty long stretch. And it's nice to see that Matt Boldy is getting in on goals now that goals are being scored and we can like properly evaluate, okay, yeah, who's good? It's like in St. Louis, right? When you were asking me, the whole team's cold, do we give up? The answer is no. You see who's going to start pointing on goals once they start coming, because they're going to start coming at some point. So it's good to see Matt Boldy getting in on those. I still don't love his 5-on-5 situation, which like is it's not great, right? You mentioned he's playing with Freddie Gaudreau. I keep forgetting who the other guy is.
It's recently outjured Jordan Greenway.
Okay, yeah. Well, exactly. He's the other guy. So Boldy's going to have to keep producing on the power play, which he has. 3 of his last 5 points have come with the man advantage. So we'll see. Like we talked about Boldy and how without Fiala, he's going to have to be the one to make the line work. And he was at the start of the season, and then he wasn't. So the question is still, the jury's still out on whether Boldy can make a line productive by himself, but he still has that power play deployment. If you want to hold him while we find out, Elon, I would take Matt Boldy over Taylor Hall. I would make that swap.
Yeah, me too, for sure. Then let's also mention that Sam Steele is still centering that top line with Kaprizov and Zuccarello. Hasn't really been doing much with it. He had a good 1-goal, 1-assist game versus Carolina like last week. And then I see today in this 4-3 win over Arizona, Steele actually scored a goal. Assisted by Kaprizov and Brodin. Oh, who's back? Brodin was injured for a little bit. But anyway, so I don't know. To me, he's like a super deep league guy, but like always a great opportunity. Like it's weird because I should be more excited, I feel like, about someone centering the top line, but I just feel like you add him and it could change any game now. But while he's there, like definitely an opportunity to score like he did today, right?
Yeah, it could definitely happen. Like he's the latest in a long line of guys who haven't been terribly impressive, even with great deployment. So I guess I'm not racing. I'm not racing to him.
But good to know that he's there.
I haven't even actually named Sam Steele for anybody wondering. Sometimes we forget to actually say the player's name. Yeah, it's good to know he's there. It's a good piece of information if you want to stream him while he's still there. But I would honestly check before you stream him. Is he still there? Because as you mentioned, I think he could be cycled off pretty easily.
Yeah, even mid-game. Well, of course, you won't be able to respond to that. Next up, let's go to Vancouver. JT Miller, so good. He had a bit of a slow start, but he had a goal and 2 assists versus Vegas on Saturday. Vancouver's playing again today versus San Jose. They're like halfway through the game. And yep, another assist for JT Miller, assisting on a Kyle Burrows goal. So there you go. Miller able to get points with anyone. He has, I guess, now 10 points in his last 8 games, over a point per game. Great. And obviously it helps because he's playing with noted insane goal scorer Bo Horvat, who's scored in 3 straight games going into today. So it'll be fun to see if Horvat can keep that going. The top 3 goal scorers right now in the league going into today, Robertson, Horvat, McDavid, in that order. So exactly as expected, right? And then, like we said, Austin Matthews way down the list. Brian, who's going to end the season with more goals, Bo Horvat or Austin Matthews?
It's a great question. I mean, I don't disbelieve in Bo Horvat at all. We lauded him the last time we talked about him, saying Bo Horvat is a great goal scorer who doesn't get enough play for being a great goal scorer. I don't know. Can you remind me what the current tally is?
Okay, I actually don't have it in front of me. So I'll get that in a sec. How about let me move on to the next question? You look it up.
Okay, sure.
Okay, so I want to talk about the goalies very quickly. Spencer Martin with a very good game on Saturday. 1 goal against on 27 shots versus Vegas in a big win. And that followed a 4-3 win versus Colorado, where he stopped 33 of 36. So Spencer Martin is being trotted out against the top teams and winning games. Demko, meanwhile, as we know, has struggled quite a bit. Demko is playing today versus a much easier opponent in San Jose. No disrespect. But he's doing good so far, right? It's 1-0. So he's stopped 14 midway through the second. We had a question from, let me try it, The Master Holt on our Discord.
Elon, it's the Maestro.
The Maestro with an Heault.
It's like a French, yeah. Like
cool.
A French, yeah. I mean, I assume. Maybe Elon's got it right.
The Maestro. Cool. Well, The Maestro asked Demko, how long is too long to wait for a rebound? Like already there were reasons for concern. And now Spencer Martin is looking like someone that the Canucks can depend on, and they don't need to like ride Demko hard. So maybe even if Demko is bouncing back, we're closer to a 50, kind of like a situation in Seattle, right? Where we've come to learn that Martin Jones is someone that the Kraken can rely on. So even if Grubauer bounces back a bit, they'll probably just go 50-50. So I'm not saying we're there yet in Vancouver, but I don't know. Another reason to not be so excited about Demko, though, like I said, he's having a good game so far right now.
And how many good games, Elon, would it take for you to be like, oh yeah, Demko's fine?
No, I don't know. Though,
like he stopped 14 shots. Don't you already feel good about Thatcher Demko going forward?
No. Well, I'm worried now that the Canucks are seeing that Spencer Martin is a good goalie, and maybe they'll go closer to 50-50.
I feel like we're overstating how great Spencer Martin has been. Right? He has a 907 save percentage so far. He is playing higher above his expected number at 5-on-5 than Demko is. Demko's been like average, and Martin's 55. What did we decide on? Save points, basis points above his expected number for Fenwick's save percentage. But honestly, I think this might be good for Demko to have somebody else in the picture, not to push him, but just to give him a breather. Let the guy catch his breath. Remember last year when the Canucks were down in the dumps? Elon, Thatcher Demko was an 898 through 13 games. And that was going up until November 17th. And the rest of the season, Demko put up a 919 save percentage through the remaining 51 games. That includes a pretty rough March and April. So really recovered just fine. And guess what? Demko has just played his 13th game. Tonight is his 14th. He played his 13th on November 21st, had an 883 save percentage up to that point. So we'll see if the 18th game turnaround happens again this season for Thatcher Demko. I don't know if it will, but I think it's gonna come. Like, I don't think Vancouver is giving up on him, and the plan is to like gently pass the baton to Spencer Martin, even as a timeshare goalie. He's been good, but like I said, not great. I think the goal is to get Thatcher Demko going in Vancouver, and I expect him to recover and bounce back at some point.
All right. Yeah. So the maestro, to answer your question, Brian is saying the question was, how long is too long to wait for a rebound? It's not
18 games.
It hasn't been long enough yet. Maybe 18 games. So yeah, check back in a couple of weeks. Okay. So, and let's see how Demko does for the rest of this game. And also, I'm seeing in the chat here, Shams is saying Scheifele scored again. Ooh, I like that. Brian, can I just give a quick update on my very close couple matchup? Or is that,
I wish you would.
Or is that boring content?
I've been dying to know.
So
it's more boring if you're asking permission to do it.
That part was boring. I see.
Yeah.
Well, I'm playing against Phil right now. And I just got a goal from Scheifele, according to Shams, though hasn't shown up yet. Shams, were you trolling me? Anyway, right now I'm winning 212 to 208. And I could really use the Scheifele goal because my opponent Phil here has still Brady Tkachuk and Kevin Fiala going in the late game, and I don't have anybody. So I need to build a bit more of a cushion here. And that Scheifele goal is still not coming through. So Shams might be my ops if this goal doesn't come through soon. He made me excited for no reason. But okay, next up here, how could Shams ever be my ops with all those great retweets for GameDayTweets.com? They're giving it to Brian. Get with it, okay? You have to learn. You're a teacher. You're with young people. You're ops. You're your enemy. It's a very common phrase. Look it up on the internet.
Amongst who? You just said I'm the one with young children. I haven't heard it.
Look, man, I don't know what to tell you. Like, I'll look it up after for you.
I spend my days around school-aged kids.
Ask them; they'll know. It's
okay,
a very common phrase going on. Go on TikTok. But okay, where do we want to go here? So Josh Archibald, Sidney Crosby. We already talked about those guys. I guess we talked about Archibald with respect to Ryan Poehling doing well. Oh yeah, Evan Bouchard had a big game for the Oilers. 2 goals versus the Rangers on 4 shots. Before that, he only had 1 assist in 10 games. Is this the start of something here? Or is this like a Pulak-esque dead cat bounce, 1 good game, and then it'll go back to nothing again?
I think Evan Bouchard is better than the 31-point pace he's on now, which is, I think, the same as Pulak is on, but I didn't say he's much better than that. So I think Bouchard beats that, but not by a ton. Like, he's still on the second power play unit. His 5-on-5 ice time has also taken a step back. Like, I don't know if you noticed, but Bouchard is playing 60 seconds fewer a night. So that's a bit of a bummer. But so long as Bouchard is on the second power play unit, we can't get too excited. Scoring should come a little more regularly for him than it has to this point. Like, Bouchard is sporting an on-ice shooting percentage below 5% at 5-on-5. So there's room to regress and grow here for Bouchard, maybe to be a 40-point guy. But I'd say that's about as much as you could expect from him, so long as Barry's holding down that power play 1 quarterback role.
Okay, yeah, I think I agree with you. But of course, people on our Discord are saying that it's any day now that Bouchard is going to take. He's looking good. Like the Oilers fans in there are saying, like, I think that Bouchard is about to take that job. So you never know. I guess this is up to Jay Woodcroft, right? And he'll decide Evan Bouchard's fantasy value, which makes it very hard for us to do it. Brian, I'm on dailyrapfacts.com, and ops. It was popularized in Chicago by Chicago drill rappers, and it means opposition or enemies. And ops is short for opposition.
Okay, but so what part of that is novel to the discussion? Are you trying to say because it's on this website that I am not with it?
All right. Well, okay. So Meek Mill, it's listing a bunch of rappers who are
I know
using
rappers.
the term.
I listened. I
Well,
know
you clearly
rap
weren't
music.
listening closely because you would have heard the term in the lyrics of these songs.
I mean, maybe I
Because,
have heard it in a song, and I just
okay, so there you go. Now you know. The
I
more you know.
I don't. I think when I speak to students tomorrow, to school aged youth, that'll
Mhm.
be my that'll
Well,
be
I'm
my
not. I'm
that'll be
talking
our
more like,
bellwether.
I guess teenagers. I don't know about these
So
like
you're moving the
8-year-olds.
goalposts here.
Well, I like the youth, like that matter, not like little kids.
They don't matter. What are
Like
you
the youth
talking
that like
about?
people are trying to sell stuff to, you know? Like, don't tell me what 8-year-olds are saying that are like watching whatever their parents make them watch.
Elon
Like people,
Shams in the Shams has a chat has a question in the chat. Can you explain drill rappers?
I don't know what that drill music progressed in American mainstream. Let me
No,
find
don't do that. Don't do
circa
that.
2012, following the success of rappers like Chief Keef, Lil Durk, Lil Reese, Fredo Santana.
Who all
All right.
use ops.
Where are we here? Going to Minnesota. Or no, where are we here? Going to Colorado. Josh Manson, another one of these defensemen having a random good game. This happens sometimes, I guess. But he had a huge game versus Dallas. 1 goal, 1 assist, 5 shots, 4 hits, 2 blocks. Imagine if he did this all the time. He'd be like the next Jacob Chikrin. But anyways, I'd imagine I don't even need to ask you about Josh Manson, but we will mention since we're in Colorado here. Evan Rodriguez is out for a bit, so JT Compher took his top power play spot, and Compher's had 2 power play assists at least a couple games ago versus Vancouver. Nothing on Saturday versus Dallas. I was mentioning earlier, like I guess in part 1, that with Evan Rodriguez out, these Colorado line combinations are like not that exciting. Like this does not look like a deep team. Like the top line, McKinnon, Rantanen, and Lehkonen. So that's good. I think the next line is Compher, Cogliano, and Logan O'Connor. Or is it Newhook with Kaut and Dryden Hunt?
No, that new hook was a demotion.
Yeah. Okay. So Compher is second line and top power play then. So anyways, any interest in JT Compher? Also, I have a confession to make. I oftentimes hear JT Compher and think Alex Kerfoot and vice versa. I always forget which one's on Colorado and which one's on Toronto.
Well, because they both used to be on Colorado and they were practically interchangeable, right? They would trade spots. They were the only other center that Colorado had in those days where they had no depth, right? It was McKinnon, Landeskog, Rantanen, and nothing else at all. So we wanted Kerfoot or Compher, whoever is on the top unit. And if they ever split those top 3, you'd want the guy that was the third piece on that line. What's the question here? Josh Manson?
No, forget about Josh Manson. I'm talking about Compher. Is he someone that people should be interested in now that he's on the top power play?
Yeah, I mean, as before, right? I mean, we were it's been a few years, right? Since Kerfoot and Compher were in this position, and we saw them get points and be rosterable for that time. So yeah, you want a Colorado top power play guy? Go for it. Fill your boots with JT Compher. It's not guaranteed. It's like an Alex Killorn type move, you know?
Oh, well, I would definitely prefer Alex Killorn. I'll say I think it's more like an Evan Rodriguez
me too,
type
for the
move.
5-on-5.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think if you were into Rodriguez before, now you're into Compher. Otherwise, probably not so much.
Yeah. Fair.
All right, what do we want to do here? Okay, TJ Oshie, we discussed. Again, I'm going down this list of top couple point producers on Friday, Saturday. Next up is a couple Sens. Matthew Joseph and Derek Brassard both had multi-point games from line 3 versus Anaheim on Friday, but I won't ask you about them, Brian, not to waste your valuable time. But since we're on Ottawa, worth noting, Thomas Chabot is back. He had a power play assist in his return, along with 2 shots, 2 hits, a block. So great to see. Obviously back to the top power play. Jake Sanderson picked up an assist at even strength in that game and also did pretty well in the peripherals, 4 shots, 2 blocks. Sanderson scored a power play goal in the previous game versus Vegas back when he was on the top power play before Chabot came back. We were like interested in Sanderson when Chabot was injured. With Chabot back, do people just drop Jake Sanderson, or the fact that he's pointed in his last couple of games, getting these peripherals, is he worth a hold, do you think?
Jake Sanderson was rostered in a lot of leagues already when Chabot went down. So I think in those leagues you keep him, and in the leagues he wasn't already rostered, you drop him. Like there's still production to come, especially as the Sens, like if and when they continue splitting their top 2 power plays, that Sanderson still gets like a pretty solid share of power play minutes in those scenarios. So in that case, yeah, you'd want him. He plays a lot of minutes, not a great peripheral getter, but occasionally will get you a point. Like good as like a 4th or 5th defenseman type, maybe even a 6th.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I like the peripherals, and it does seem like he has a lot of talent. So He just needs to help Ottawa stop letting in so many goals, and then the Sens can maybe be a good team one day. Ottawa's playing tonight, by the way, against LA, so we'll see how you'll know another game of data, dear listener, when you listen to this podcast, after you see what Ottawa does versus LA. Next up, Seth Jarvis is here on the list. We called him a snoozer a long while back, but actually he's back on the top line recently, playing with Aho and Natchez, which is a really great spot. And he scored a goal and took 4 shots on Saturday versus Calgary. So if he holds that top line spot, it's kind of interesting to me. He also had an assist the game before. He's still not on the top power play. He started the season, again, we're talking about Seth Jarvis. He started the season on the top power play. He's being blocked right now by Stefan Nason, who's still there. And Nason's actually doing pretty good. He has 2 power play points in his last couple of games. So I don't think that's going to change anytime soon. Brian, who do you think gets more points between Jarvis and Nason next week? Like, Carolina's playing 3 games. Who's going to do better, the top liner or the top power player?
It's a real toss up between Seth Jarvis and Stefan, aka Steve Nason. I think I'll lean towards Jarvis just because, you know, there's more time on the ice with the top line than Nason has on the ice with the top power play. And Nason's been pretty hit and miss in that spot, which is exactly what you'd expect. So give me Jarvis, although I'm not that excited, although he does have 11 shots over his last 3 games. So that's promising.
Yeah, he's a guy who was drafted in a lot of leagues this year, and for a reason, right? He has a pedigree.
Top line, top power play was the expectation. And he spent a little time there.
Mm-hmm. And now he's back on the top line. He still has that pedigree. It's always possible this is the moment that he's finally going to start to do something. So I wouldn't completely ignore him. I don't know if I'm like rushing to grab him now, but I'm watching him for sure now that he's producing again. All right, next up we have a bunch of guys we already talked about. Teddy Bluger, Brandon Saad over in St. I guess we didn't talk about Saad, but come on. He's one of these St. Louis guys. We'll see what the deployment is again after these injuries, or we get the new lines with this Shen injury. Nason, Michael Bunting. Bunting, 3 assists over his last couple of games. We said when he was super cold, we said on the podcast, I think, Brian, we can take credit for this one, that Michael Bunting is someone that will probably get back in the top 6, probably back with Matthews, and he'll probably start producing again. And I think anyone who grabs him is going to thank us, right? Because he's doing pretty well. Yeah,
he was in free agency, and I didn't have the move to make for him when he was available in my Cupful division. I'm very, very sad about it. I did try to trade. I tried to trade for him, but he got like an assist, like as I sent the trade offer. So I think, I assume he's just gone, like not available to me for the season. Oh well, good job if you've got him.
Yeah, he's he again, to repeat, last year he had 65 point pace, right? 63 points in 79 games. Right now he's only pacing for 46. I don't know if he hits like 65 again, but I wouldn't be surprised if he's like 60, like close there. Like he's on this great line. Hopefully it lasts. Right now it's with Matthews and Nylander instead of Marner, but whatever. If you're with Matthews, it's going to be good. Brian already told us why he's not too worried about Austin Matthews. Okay, next let's go to a guy we haven't talked about too much this season. Andre Burakovsky had 2 goals versus Vegas on Friday for Seattle, following a 1-goal, 2-assist game versus the Sharks on Wednesday, which brought Burakovsky to 20 points in 20 games. That's right, point per game, Andre Burakovsky. And Seattle's playing today against Anaheim, and I believe Burakovsky's at it again. He has an assist. So now 21 points in 21 games so far. This last game isn't even over yet. He's really good. Like, Brian, how big of a steal is Burakovsky? Like, he was signed for 5 years at only 5.5 mil, and he seems like the top offensive producer on this Seattle team. I'm just curious to know if you think this guy's I know you've always been kind of into him, but I always thought him was like more of a secondary producer when he was on Colorado and on Washington. I didn't know if he had it in him to be like kind of a driver like this, but it really seems like, he's doing really well on this line. And I wonder if he's going to be able to keep it up all season.
That's the that's the problem. Burakovsky has had to change that conception that he's just riding coattails in Washington with getting exposure to Ovechkin on the top power play, or in Colorado just being around an incredible group of players with Kadri, right? It's like everyone else is doing it, Burakovsky isn't. But in Seattle, it's amazing. It's crazy to see that Seattle can support a point per game player. It's great to see that it's happening. And it's not surprising that it's Andre Burakovsky. It's not so surprising. He was a 65-point player in Colorado, and now he has a power play role where he's thriving. 8 power play points in 20 games for Burakovsky. On top of that, he's shooting more at 5-on-5 and on the power play. He's added a shot per game on average to get to 3 shots per game. he's participating a little much more than I could expect him to continue in the points that are being scored while he's on the ice. But that still means that I think he's still got 70-point potential here. And he could still continue to surprise us and do better. Like Burakovsky was already a legit top sixer, and this is the first time that I think he's really been given the opportunity to prove that he is like a top line player, even though Seattle, it's funny for me to say that because they have like a top 6 or even top 9. Anyway, we were going to talk about Brock Besser earlier in the show and we didn't, but I had a note here that I would trade I'd trade Brock Besser for Andre Burakovsky.
You'd rather Burakovsky?
Yeah.
Yeah, Besser is interesting, actually. I guess I skipped him for time, but we might as well go and talk about him because, well, he's on like a great hot streak, but he's been bumped from the top power play for Kuzmenko. So I wonder if it's the kind of situation where Besser's going to likely cool down a little bit. Like he's been getting points in like every game. So yeah, I guess. And also like Besser was on the third line. Actually, Vancouver's playing right now against San Jose. So we can look at what the lines have been so far through a period and a bit. And I'm seeing, so it's been Pettersson with Mikheyev and Kuzmenko. I'm over here on Frozen Tools. And then Horvat with Miller and Höglander. Yeah, leaving Besser to play with Connor Garland and Sheldon Dries. Dries or Dries? I don't know. Stinks.
Yeah. It's not great for Besser. He's down 2 minutes a night at 5-on-5, let alone losing top power play opportunity. He's been shooting like 5 or 6% at 5-on-5 since the start of last season, which, I'd say, oh, well, that's going to regress. But this year, Besser's expected goals rates are lower than ever. And I actually don't know that Besser deserves much better than the 1 5-on-5 goal he scored on 26 shots. He's had this nice run of assists, but he's also participated in 90% of the 5-on-5 goals scored while he's on the ice versus his usual 60%. So like with 5-on-5 numbers that are propped up by this high participation rate, I think Besser's going to need that top power play role. Like, I know his score sheet numbers look good. Like, Besser's pacing for 77 points, and this is a very negative edit for somebody doing that well. And maybe there's some systems and contextual things and factors that aren't helping Besser that could eventually swing back into his favor, like coaching. But off the top power play, like even if it's just like going back and forth between being there, if Besser's there for 3 games and off for 3 games, I'd be nervous about that. And I might look to sell him while I can for a 70-point guy. Let Besser be someone else's stress. And I think I'd consider Burakovsky a pretty decent trade candidate.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. I would do that. I think it's a really keen observation. You probably don't have much time. If you're listening to this, and if Vancouver wins today and it looks like they're going to stick with these lines, then you probably only have a couple games before people will realize that Besser is not going to be able to produce the same way with this deployment. So that's a shame. But anyways, we were talking about Burakovsky on Seattle, and I was going to bring up how Philip Grubauer had his first game after coming back from injury. He led in 2 early goals. Brian, I added him. So I had Martin Jones, and then I figured, okay, I guess I had an opening for a goalie start on Friday. And so I figured, whatever, now it's a 50-50. So I'll just like swap Jones for Grubauer to get the start. And then I'll probably end up dropping Grubauer. Anyway, Grubauer led in a couple early goals. And I was like, kicking myself like, oh, what am I doing to myself adding Grubauer? And then he ended up actually having a good game. He didn't let in any more goals. And Seattle ended up pulling off a really big win versus Vegas. And now I'm looking today. And while we've been talking, Martin Jones is not doing well. He's let in now 4 goals against Anaheim. We're almost on the second period here. I'm seeing 4 goals against for Jones on 19 shots. That is not good. John Gibson also not doing good.
Well, that's old news.
That's old news.
It's also old news for Martin Jones, but there was newer news saying that Jones could do better. But giving up 4 to Anaheim, and what are they in the second period? Anaheim hasn't scored 4 goals. I'm just looking at their game log now. It's been 9 games since they last did. They had a run of games where they scored 5, 5, 6, 4. But aside from that, they're not a good goal scoring team. So when you're giving up 4 to Anaheim, and it looks like Andy in the chat is mentioning a couple were real stinkers too. That is, yeah. I have Martin Jones in a cupful, and I am considering based on this performance. I assume Grubauer is going to get the next start. That's at LA on Tuesday. If my calendar's right. And then, plays on a bit. Maybe if Grubauer stinks and Jones gets back in on a busy night on Thursday, we might already have 2 goalies. And then Saturday, Seattle plays again on another busy night. I don't know. I think Martin Jones might be just about done on my roster.
Yeah, let him go, man. I'm excited, actually, that I let him go and didn't let him eat me in this bad game. And now I'm kind of excited to have Grubauer again. Obviously, like I know what this is going to likely lead to, but now that I have Grubauer, who I was totally planning on dropping like next week, I'm just like out of moves. But now I'm going to hold, see how he does against LA. Maybe he can be the Grubauer who I drafted that I thought could be the starting goalie on what should be a good team. But obviously, I know it's likely not going to happen.
The eternal hope for Philip Grubauer. Elon, one more thing before we close out the show. Actually, two more things because I forgot the Horvat Matthews thing. 17-10 is the lead that Horvat has over Matthews in goal scoring. I think Matthew could overtake. I think he could. Yeah, I think there's he's got a decent shot.
Yeah, Matthews is very, very good at scoring goals. I think he will.
And then the other one was in Tampa. We moved past them before, like you had taken a note on Hedman and like that he's still off the top power play. Should we be concerned? And like last week we were like, yeah, you should probably start getting concerned and like be sweating that. And I put a tweet out to Eddie in the Yard, who is Eduardo Encina, who covers the Lightning for the Tampa Bay Times, asking like, what's the deal? Like, what is it if Hedman comes back or when Hedman comes back to the top power play unit? And I got a very helpful response from someone who follows both us and Eddie. So Michael G responded with his opinion, which is that Hedman doesn't get the job back until Sergachev loses it. Like it's Sergachev de facto right now. So this is a fan, someone who watches the Lightning a lot, but honestly it makes a lot of sense to me. This seems to be the situation to me. I'm looking for more like inside info. But Sergachev is like, he's played well there. The power play is doing well. The Lightning aren't mired in like some losing stretch. And Michael also made the point that the longer that doesn't happen and that Sergachev stays there, the less likely it becomes that Hedman ever earns it back, and ended his thoughts by saying scary times for people with Hedman on their roster. So
yeah,
I agree. Like I think last week you asked me if I'd buy low on Hedman and I think I balked a little.
I think I asked you if you would trade Sergachev for Hedman, and I think you might have said yes, but I think at this point I'd probably rather Sergachev, right?
Yeah, I think I would. Like I might try and buy high on Sergachev, but I don't think you're getting to do that. I think a line has shifted here. And anyway, we'll see. Yeah. We'll see if we get some beat input on what's going on in Tampa. Still, we'll keep you all posted.
We'll do our best.
It's looking dire for anybody who is relying on Hedman for big power play contributions.
Well, and also for even strength contributions. Like he only has 1 point in his last 8 games overall. Like Tampa lit up St. Louis, and he didn't get a point.
Yeah.
Like, Sergachev, by the way, is only 24 years old. It feels like he's been around forever. This might be like one of your last opportunities to get him for like relatively cheap, even though he's doing so well, like in a keeper league. I wonder if now, like, do you think Sergachev is maybe like now a Hedman and we just don't realize it yet? And like,
I think the second Sergachev lands on that top power play unit permanently. I think
Hedman, that's like 3 or 4th top defenseman in fantasy. Like, is that like, do you think that that's where we could be at with Sergachev, like before too long?
Yeah. I think I'd have to take a closer look at like Sergachev has never been a huge peripheral getter or shooter, right? And I don't.
Yeah, that's the problem. He's still only taking like 1 or 2 shots a game. So I don't think he'll ever be a Hedman, but he might be like a high up guy.
Yeah,
like someone you want. Yeah, interesting. Okay. Anyway, definitely a situation to watch. Sorry to anyone, including Lewis, who has Hedman, because that's a bummer. I was complaining about Chris Letang before, and I'm still like not so happy with Letang, but I definitely am happy to have Letang and not Hedman. So it could be worse. Who else did I want to talk about today? I think I'm pretty much done here. Oh yeah, I just wanted to bring up some Calgary guys. So, I'm going through the list of players who've gotten points in the last couple games. So obviously I wasn't going to bring up anyone on Calgary because they only have like 3 goals over the last 3 games or something like that. Like they're doing nothing. Shams wanted us to talk about them. He said curious about Toffoli or basically any of the big guns in Calgary. None of them seem to be getting points lately. I'm looking over the last 3 games. Blake Coleman is the only one to have 3 points, and they all came 4 games. In the last 4 games, Blake Coleman has 3 points to lead the team, and all 3 of those points came in a game versus Philly 4 games ago. Since then, only 3 goals over the last 3 games for the Flames. Going back further, like Toffoli, Huberdeau, Kadri, like they're all not doing much for a while now. Like Lindholm was like super hot before going quiet over these past 4 games. Brian, is this like kind of like what you were saying about St. Louis and like some teams, like when they're just all doing badly, then you're not worried about anybody? Or are you starting to get worried about the Toffoli's and Kadris and even Huberdeau's of the world?
I mean, Huberdeau, I like, so yeah, it is partially that. Like, don't worry. Oh, the Flames have only scored 3 times, so there's not a whole lot of points to go around, and we'll judge these guys based on when their team does start scoring. But Huberdeau, like I saw like something like Daryl Sutter's feeling more comfortable with him. He wants to give him more opportunity. His ice time is still like not awesome. And he only has 3 shots over these last 3 games, including a game where he had none at all. This Kadri, he's had 8 shots over his last 2 games. Toffoli's being Toffoli, he's got 2 shots in each of the last 3 games. It's not no, it's not exciting. I'm not excited by it. Well, I'm not going to react too much. I don't think anything has changed from the last time we've talked about either of these guys. It's just a matter of waiting for Calgary and their offense to start clicking and then seeing what happens. But it's a painful wait, especially for anyone sitting with Huberdeau, who is just, he's doing nothing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And he's on a weird line now. Like, I guess the 3rd line with Coleman. Like, I don't know, but they keep changing it around. Obviously, it's going to keep changing. I wouldn't worry about what the lines were in the last game because since Calgary is not producing, things are going to keep changing. Brian, I guess that's it for the run of players I want to discuss. I guess I could quickly say back to this Kraken Ducks game. Cam Fowler, we talked about him last week. He has another 2 assists today. He like both on the power play, right? Like this Cam Fowler is for real right now. I mean, maybe not forever, but if he's still out there for you, like I'll repeat what I was already saying last week, like definitely go get him. Like you're getting a top power play guy. Klingberg, I think, is injured right now, but he was already bumped from the top power play even like before this injury. So I'll just, continually interested in Cam Fowler, or I'm continuing to be interested in Cam Fowler for the short term and maybe now medium term at this point.
Yeah, if he's still out there. Elon, do you remember who quarterbacked? I was trying to think of this as I was getting ready for the show. Who quarterbacked the power play before Cam Fowler in Anaheim?
Oh, I don't.
Yeah, like I'd have to research it. Like I'm just looking up. He's been the quarterback. I mean, aside from last year or the last 2 years, right? Like Shattenkirk got some time. But like since 2010-11, since he was a rookie.
Really? It's been that long that Fowler has been there
ever since then, according to Frozen Tools. He's had a 66%, at least a 66%. No, sorry, not at least a 66%, at least a 55 to 66% share of power play time, I think, except for 2014-15.
Sami Vatanen, right? Sami Vatanen was there for a little bit, if I recall correctly.
In 2014. Yeah, well, there was the Vatanen versus Lindholm days.
No, well, Andy says Solani, defenseman, bro. Yeah, I don't know. Maybe it's Boschman and Chris Pronger.
Oh
I don't know.
Boschman, yeah. I thought I could research it quickly on the show. I can't find the answer off the top here.
Well, we'll have to ask people to tweet at us to let us know if they know the answer to this question about who was the last top power play defenseman quarterback for Anaheim before Cam Fowler got the job, and also to let us know anything else you want to tell us about the show and how you liked it, because we are now at the end of the show. So thanks everyone for listening, and yeah, we'd love your feedback. Hit us up. We answer your advice questions on Twitter. We do our best, but also we'll take just some general, what do you like? What do you not like? Like we're here coming up with something novel every single week, trying to keep this fresh and interesting. So if you have an idea of how we could do this any better, we're doing the show for you, and we want you to keep listening. So yeah, hit us up. Also, if you like the show and you want to spread the word, help us out a little bit, you can give us that 5-star review over on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you listen to your shows, or even anywhere you've heard of that people listen to shows and leave reviews. That really helps us, and it costs you nothing. And if you actually do have like $5 a month that you wouldn't mind spending, you could also support us financially by becoming a patron of Keeping Karlsson, which, is a little bit, but it goes a long way because it makes us feel good, makes us feel like we're putting out a show that people appreciate. And also we give you like a lot of perks. A lot of these podcasts and like creators with Patreons, they have like a million tiers and they're really trying to squeeze, as much as money as they can out of you. Brian and I are just like, we don't have time for this. Like, give us $5 a month, and we're going to give you every perk we could think of, which includes you join our Discord. Okay. And Brian and I are super active in the Discord, answering all the advice questions there. We have our patron cast every month. We have these live shows. Like this show was a live show that was just for the patrons. We've had a lot of fun chatting with Andy and Shams and Schwab Squad over here in the Discord, Travis. So That's a perk. The show notes, like whenever we think of a perk, we make it a perk for our patrons. And so if you have an idea, by the way, of a perk, if you're a patron, and it's not gonna be a lot of work for us. The couple, by the way, is another big perk. So yeah, we give it all to you. So check it out if you're interested. And also you get that perk of just knowing you're supporting a podcast that you listen to. And we put out 5 shows a week for you. So hopefully you think that's worth it. So keepingkarlsson.com/patron. But with that, Brian, I'm gonna be done my little begging segment here. Just like, also, we're happy if you just want to listen to the show and not be a patron, like we're even just appreciating you being a listener of the podcast, don't get me wrong. But yeah, Brian, with that, let's cue the outro music. Why don't you go ahead and read us the credits?
All right. This episode of the Keeping Karlsson Fantasy Hockey Podcast was presented by Dobber Hockey and powered by our patrons, including our super supporters, Rob, David, Derek, Ryan, Tom, Andrea, Tyler, Aaron, Kevin, and of course, Patty. Thank you to our team of Kakupful co-commissions who are keeping this league of like 600 managers and 42 or 43 division, just like running so smoothly. All thanks to you. And of course, our Kakupful coordinator, Kevin Hebert. Thanks to you, Elon and Shams, for all the great, amazing news and lines and goalie news over at GameDayTweets.com. Thanks to Ben and Lewis. It was American Thanksgiving. Right? I'm giving thanks, a lot of it, for being so great on Short Shifts at Short Shifts KK on Twitter. Also to Dave Betton and the Stream Scheme. You can follow him at NHL Stream Scheme. Logo art by BrandonWeeb.com. Outro music by Pat Roach. This episode was researched with help from Dobber Hockey, Frozen Tools, Dobber Prospects, Natural Stat Trick, Evolving Hockey, Cap Friendly, The Athletic, HockeyGoalies.org, Hockey Reference, Hockey Viz, Hockey Database, Elite Prospects, and Yahoo!
Great job as always, Brian. This has been a lot of fun. And to everyone listening, good luck in your matchups next week. Hopefully this show has helped you out with that. Also, definitely check out the Stream Scheme, which dropped yesterday, where Dave let you know what are the good schedules and the good players that you might want to target from those teams with good schedules. Then, obviously, throughout the week, Ben and Lewis will be dropping their regular Short Shifts episodes. So make sure to be subscribed to get all of this content. And Brian, while people are listening to all these shows and enjoying themselves and waiting for our next mega show next Sunday, what do you recommend they do with their free time?
Please, well, yeah, in your free time, if you want to use it for good, do what you can to make sure that fantasy hockey is for everyone.
Great show. Thanks everyone for listening. You're live. That was so fun.
Thanks.
Okay. Brian, can I ask you an advice question? Or is it too or should I go? I could do it on Discord.
Yeah, well, I was going to ask you, I haven't done my research at all for next week, so I was just going to ask you.
Okay. Well, I've got one for today.
Like my streaming, I haven't. Okay, what is it?
So I'm up 218 to 208. Okay. Mm-hmm. There's a period left for, I have Zegras and McCann and Mikheyev and Barabanov. So I have some guys going, and that's it though. Like soon. Oh, and Grubauer might get in today's game, which would be nice. So I'm up by 10. I've got a few guys still playing. My opponent still has Hurdle. And then he also has Kachuk and Fiala, Brady Kachuk and Kevin Fiala. So it's gonna be like super close. And I still have a move left. So I could add someone from today's late game between Ottawa and LA. And if I were to do so, it looks like from Ottawa, I think my best options are either like, I guess, Pinto just got, I thought Pinto was gonna be available, I guess, while I was recording. Oh man, so what have I missed here? Pinto just got picked up. So I don't even have Pinto available to me. I think my best option on Ottawa would be like one of these third liners, like a Tyler Mott, or maybe I can grab like a Zub, Artem Zub on defense, or Matthew Joseph, Derek Brassard, those types. Or from LA, I can go with, oh man, my options are really bad. Arthur Kaliev, I guess, or Mikey Anderson on defense. Do you think it's even worth it, or should I just forget it, hope that it goes well this week, and I can use my move to grab someone really good for next week, like a good person who has a good off day schedule that's definitely going to go at 3 a.m. tomorrow.
I think I might okay, let's say Zub gets 2 points and that's the difference.
So I'm projected right now to win 221 to 219. So it's like really just like razor's edge, like 2 points. According to the projector,
I guess I think you should probably try and get like a floor guy,
like just so Zub. There was a stretch where Zub was like really good in Kakupful, and like he was getting but I guess he doesn't block that much. He just kind of hits a lot.
No, he spends a lot of time on the ice, but yeah, the peripherals don't automatically come.
He scored a goal in the last game. I guess that's not going to happen too often. He had 5 shots randomly against San Jose.
I didn't even realize he was. Yeah, I would go Zub. Like he's got a good good solid floor. I think I'd give yourself some breathing room.
All right. I'm going to go Zub, I think. And I'm going to drop Peugeot, who I kind of like, but I just got him out of free agency last week.
He's a streamer, I think.
Yeah, I'd rather drop Mikheyev, but I already have him in, like, playing today and doing nothing. I gave up Blake Wheeler to get Mikheyev in that trade. Just to get Wheeler, get all these points. But that's how it goes. Anyway, thanks everyone. Norma saying I think Jones is confirmed as the starter. You mean for the third period? That's a bummer. Would have been nice if he came in. I mean, if Grubauer came in. Anyways, Brian, any last questions for me, or do you want to just chat after?
No, you'll get him in like an hour, probably.
Sweet. All right. Well, thanks again, everyone. All hail Zub. Bye.
Go Zub, go. Zub.
See y'all.
Zubai.
Zubai.